All right, welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Just get something to eat and drink and take a seat, please. My name is Robin Nimmer, and I have the privilege of being your MC for this evening. I'm a senior hydrogeologist, and I lead the Water Resources Division at Alta Science and Engineering. I'm a Vandal alum. I have a master's in hydrology and a PhD in geology. And I've been working on water issues and solutions on the Palouse Basin for over 20 years. And so I'm really proud to be here tonight, and I'm proud to be on the board of directors for the Water Summit, as well as on the planning committee. And I would love to introduce the rest of the planning committee to you. So if you could please rise when I call your name. Kelly Cooper, she might be out back. Kristen Capwell, Mike Fappel, Aaron Ghislani, John Kimberling, and Paul Kimmel. Let's give them a big round of applause. Just some general housekeeping. We have restrooms out the doors and to your right around the corner. Sponsors, we couldn't do this event without you. We're really appreciative and that we're able to keep this event free. So we thank them, and you'll see them on the slides periodically throughout the event. Raffle tickets. If you didn't get a raffle ticket when you came in, you're going to want to do that. You can win a low-flow toilet, courtesy of Tyler Garrett with Moscow Building Supply. And then we also have an SYG gift certificate for some landscaping. Food and drink. The food is provided by Petite Plates. I've got a lot of compliments already, and I can't wait to tell her about it. And then we also have Johnny Handy with Paradise Creek Brewery providing all the drinks tonight. The exhibits, please take a moment and check out the great displays in the front foyer with PBAC and the Palouse Conservation District. And waste-wise, you may have noticed the waste-wise station in the back of the room. A great thank you to Kelly Cooper for creating this program as an AmeriCorps volunteer for the City of Moscow. To be environmentally friendly and to have a zero waste summit event, Kelly has stations set up for composting or recycling all of tonight's waste. All the flatware, cups, plates, napkins, and food scraps are compostable. Please be sure to dispose of your waste in the proper bins and help me thank Kelly. All right, well, I'm really excited to finally get started here. We are incredibly blessed to have Nez Perce Tribe's Shannon Wheeler with us today. Chairman Wheeler was first elected to serve on the Nez Perce Tribal Executive Committee, the governing body of the Nez Perce Tribe, in 2016. He was re-elected to a second 3-year term in 2019. During his tenure on the governing council, he served 1 year as the chairman of the Law and Order Subcommittee and 1 year as the treasurer. He has served as chairman of the Nez Perce Tribal Executive Committee for the past 5 years. Chairman Wheeler's experience in the private sector and as an individual exercising Nez Perce tribal reserved rights has served as the foundation for the policies he has advocated for during his time on the executive committee. These policies include job creation, tribal economic development, natural resource management, and preservation of the culture, history, and way of life of the Nimiipuu. During his tenure as an elected official, he helped create a day worker program, develop the Nez Perce Tribal Water Code, purchase several retail enterprises, and work with federal and state agencies on resource and land management throughout the Nez Perce Tribal's Aboriginal territory. Please help me welcome Chairman Shannon Wheeler.
Tatsalach, Oikalo Himuma, Kalatiwama, Waswinik, Titoka Tim, Tuiokpu, Wako Payata Tatstamina, Nimiipuu. I know it's all foreign to you, but this is the language that was spoken upon this land for thousands of years. And what I was saying is thank you, friends and family, and welcome. Kia ta'owatis, welcome to Palutzpa, the land that we're on now, the sacred land that we're on. And also that I come to you today with a good heart. Wako Payata Tatstamina, Nimiipuu. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to address the summit and thank the organizers as well, the mayor of Moscow, Pullman, the committee, Paul Kimmel, thank you guys for all the work that you're doing, and appreciate the opportunity to be able to share with you a perspective of the Nez Perce tribe and the relationship to the land and what that means to us. And the relationship from 1805, I'd like to start there for understanding of the depth of relationship that we have with the United States of America and its citizens. And so when we think about 1805 and Lewis and Clark, we think about the Corps of Discovery and what they were doing out here, and carving a pathway to the Pacific Ocean so that America could open up trade into the Asian Pacific Rim. And it was important to treat with the Nez Perce because you were coming through the heart of Nez Perce country. And in 1855, then governor of the territory, Washington Territory, Isaac Stevens, negotiated a treaty with the Nez Perce. That treaty was then ratified in 1859 by Congress and sits in the Constitution of the United States under Article 6, Clause 2, the supremacy clause within the Constitution, and which we all follow and are subject to the rule of law. And hence, the discussions of why Nez Perce should be in the discussion with the Palouse Basin aquifer issue that's going on and the water issues that are happening. And so when I speak about the land itself, and when I say ki hata'u watis, watis is the land and the sacredness of it, and we all know what it means. We all know what water means, and I don't have to explain to everybody. But somewhere deep down inside, we have to know that we share water with one another. We share it with the older, what we call our elders, even older than before human beings were here, the animals were here, but the trees and the plant life and the rocks that are all a part of this planet and what makes it what it is, or maybe what it was. We have a lot of work to do to ensure that our future generations are able to live in a place that is should have the quality of life that we all want for one another. And so that's part of the reason that the Nez Perce are here, is that we want to ensure that the water that's being discussed here, the land itself is spoken for. And, we all know that expansion is happening. This beautiful facility here, the work that Schweitzer is doing for the world is all a part of growth in this area. And things need to be accounted for. But at the same time, when we look at it, we look at growth of the neighbors. There's just positive effects to it for us as well. And so we want to be a part of the solutions going forward when these water issues rise to the top, I guess. And so, I didn't know how much time I have up here, but I don't want to make you go over the agenda or put you off on the agenda. But there's some things that, deep down in our hearts that we want to express, that, these partnerships are real to us. They're heartfelt to us. Our people have been through a lot of things in our life historically, the traumas that our people face, displacement and war, friendship, collaborative efforts, cooperative efforts, restorative efforts. All of these different things that are a part of who Nez Perce are now was something that we've endured and lived and continue to live. And for those future generations, we want to ensure that these partnerships are understood from a Nez Perce perspective. As I mentioned, the Treaty of 1855, which is why we're here, is a treaty with the United States and its citizens. And so in 1855, I just want to put some context to the teeth of why we're here. So the context of 1855 was that the United States needed to treat with the Nez Perce because the Nez Perce were the ones that could come to the table and grant the United States the right to utilize the waterways as highways and build roads, come to our lands. And we also ceded millions of acres to the United States. That is, the U.S. is still benefiting from today. Agriculture fields, forests, waterways, all a part of the lands that the Nez Perce ceded. So in 1855, when we sat down with the United States, what we did is we executed an administration of law by granting the U.S. that. And so if that law existed in 1855, it still exists today. If it wasn't taken away in any subsequent treaties, which we did have several treaties with the United States of America. And so when the discussion of the Palouse Aquifer is happening, that's a part of that administrative authority that the Nez Perce have. And that's a perspective from me, from the Nez Perce and our people that I represent. And so we're here in good faith to discuss and be open and work in a collaborative way. I mentioned it the last time I was here, that we want to see the accountability for this. We want to see the community grow. We want to see the community prosper. We want the quality of life to be what it is, why you live here, why you want to grow your kids here. I mean, all the things of why you leave your doors unlocked, and you know, how you can go and just be in a good place. There's some bad places in this world, and this ain't one of them. And we want to continue to be a good neighbor, a good partner, and see this thing through so that the thoughts of where my water is going to come from and what the growth looks like going into the future isn't a question anymore. It's just a question of, you know, let's enjoy this place, let's love this place, let's take care of this so that the future generations will know that the people here at this time in history had done the right things, had pulled the right people in the correct rooms, and these decisions that were made were made soundly. They were made with information that was gathered, facts that were put together, and decisions that formulated from that information. And it takes all of us together to do that. I just want to tell all of you that the Nez Perce people, the Nez Perce tribe, are here to be a part of that discussion and to ensure that this growth in the area will happen and your water needs will not be a worry for you or your children into the future. And all the different things that are being considered, you know, piping from the Clearwater River, we want to be a part of that discussion. You know, we're looking at pump storage as a form of energy. It could be partnerships there. You know, there's just a lot of different areas that we're open for partnerships, and we want to continue those discussions and continue to work with, I know Tyler has been down to visit us, and Paul, and so let's keep up the communication. Let's keep up these potential partnerships. And you know, like I said, I don't know how much time I have, but I do know that I have to catch a flight in Spokane, and so I probably should cut it off now and just turn it back over to, sorry, I forgot your name, Robin, and thank all of you for being here, and know that the Nez Perce tribe are your Lautiwa, your friend, your neighbor, and we'll be here to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Wheeler. I know every year we really enjoy having you, and I don't know, just the feeling that he brings that we're all together in this, and I love that. All right, well, it is our great pleasure to welcome two distinguished leaders to the podium. Their joint presence demonstrates the spirit of partnership and dedication they bring to their communities. They exemplify our region's collective effort to protect and manage our water resources wisely. Please help me welcome Pullman Mayor Francis Benjamin and Moscow Mayor Art Bedke.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this the new edition of the Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee and the Water Summit. I've been here at this meeting many times over the years, and it's really important for us to get together here to review information pertinent to our shared water resource, the water issues in general, and an update on the direction we're going to be taking in the next little bit to assure us of having water into the future. We need it because not only do we have to have the water to thrive, but also just to exist here on the Palouse. Relative to this, I'd like to thank our organizers, Paul Kimmel and John Kimberling over there, who've been faithful stewards of this summit for many, many years. And being a scientist myself, I want to take special note of those who provided the results of research that they've engaged in for a long time to provide the information that underpins the actions that we take here today. Also have to notice that we have a good collaboration among many entities, the cities of Pullman and Moscow, University of Idaho and Washington State University, Latah and Whitman counties, as well as the Idaho Department of Water Resources and Washington Department of Ecology. Everybody is pulling together in the same direction, and that benefits all of us. But with that, that's my welcome to this fine event, and I think we should continue to work to take advantage of the research that's been done to take action, because every year we waste before we take action on these issues is a year that we waste on the other end when we may be sadly needing the additional information and the water especially. Francis.
Thank you, Mayor. It's good to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to be part of the 22nd, jointly with you, annual Palouse Basin Water Summit. For over 22 years, the Palouse Basin Water Summit has been true to its original ideals of communication and engagement. Communication, providing our communities with accurate, reliable, and relevant water supply information. And engagement, engaging with our communities so that we don't just have the information, but we also understand the water issues and are part of the decision-making process related to future water resource decisions. Our communities are better because of the summit's ideals and also, as Mayor Bedke said, a third word, regional collaboration on water. When we talk about collaboration, collaboration brings together partnerships, as we heard from Chairman Wheeler. 2 nations, 2 states, 2 universities, 2 countries, 2 cities, along with many businesses and entities working together in collaboration. Our joint congressional delegation has actually taken notice of this collaboration and referenced it as a model for other entities on how to get along and how to get things done. Collaborating also includes a shared vision where we work together toward common goals, balancing growth with stewarding the resources that we've been entrusted. It includes pooled resources. We're able to combine expertise, funding, and technologies to obtain efficiencies and also greater impact. And lastly, it keeps the decision-making closer to the decision-making model closest to the local. So we're able to keep the decision-making where the people that it impacts are closest to the people that are making the decisions, which keeps us aware and also responsive. I appreciate that focus with the Water Summit, with the collaboration, the communication and engagement, and especially for my work with Mayor Bedke, and even though this is your last one as mayor, I want you to know that I've definitely appreciated his wit, his insight. We've had some incredible conversations, and I appreciate the wealth of knowledge that he brings, his strategy, his leadership, and also the collaboration. And I trust that you're training the new mayor to be able to follow in your footsteps, so in all good things. With that, let's turn it over to awards.
Yeah, here every year we hand out awards courtesy of the Water Summit for folks who've done good deeds for many years too. So each year the Water Summit Board of Directors recognizes individuals and institutions, agencies, or nonprofit organizations with the Palouse Basin Advocate Water Award. The award is intended to recognize those supporting the educational mission of the Palouse Basin Water Summit. This year, we're pleased to recognize the following people and institutions: Dr. Earl Bennett, the University of Idaho Office of Sustainability, and the Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories. So, first up, we have Dr. Earl Bennett. Earl began working with the University of Idaho Geological Survey at the University of Idaho in 1975. He became Associate Director in 1986 and State Geologist in 1989. In 1997, he was appointed the Dean of the College of Mines and Earth Resources at the U of I and the Dean of the new College of Science established in June 2002. Earl retired from the university and the State Survey in 2003. In retirement, he began a new career studying Idaho history that he served for 16 years on the boards of directors of the Idaho State and Latah County Historical Societies. He serves as a Genesee historian. He received the Esto Perpetua Award in 2024, the highest award and honor given by Idaho for contribution to our state's history. Earl's been associated with PBAC for many years, and congratulations, Earl. And come up, receive your award, and feel free to make a few remarks of your own. Yeah, we gotta open it up and show it off a little bit. We have to show this off. Yeah, you could be Vanna White. So,
Very cool.
Suitable for framing.
Thank you.
so congratulations, Earl.
Thanks, Mayor.
Jump right in.
So, many thanks to Mayor Bedke for the award. However, the real award to me for having watched PBAC for so many years is the incredible knowledge that we now know about our aquifer, which when PBAC started was ground zero. We knew there were water coming out of the basalts, and that was it. When you look at the world today, there's great deserts, and at one time, maybe thousands of years ago, some of them were the centers of civilization. They're not there anymore because there's no water. Moscow and Pullman are two of the towns within the state that have had the foresight to look forward for 20 years at the most important resource that we've got and we know is going away eventually, that is water. And key to all of that is this meeting that we have annually. I accept the award, but I want a rousing round of applause for Paul Kimmel and for John Kimberling, who have been behind this thing since day one. Thank you very much.
We need to get a photo. Paul? We weren't quick enough. I'll get that to him.
Okay. Thanks, Earl. Next up is the University of Idaho Office of Sustainability. So, receiving this is Madison Doherty from the office, and she'll be up here wherever she's hiding. The Office of Sustainability is responsible for the development and implementation of initiatives that promote sustainable operations and engagement opportunities for the University of Idaho. The Office of Sustainability coordinates with students, staff, and faculty to create sustainable policies, practices, and programs that align with the university's values and goals, in addition to partnering with Idaho's industry leaders on synergistic initiatives. The University of Idaho is poised for innovation in economic, social, and environmental sustainability in all that they do. As we shared last year at the summit, the university cares about water, sustainability, and is presidentially focused and committed to sustainability, responsible stewardship of natural environment, and other issues. So congratulations, Madison and the University of Idaho.
All right, yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet, but yeah, I'm accepting this award on behalf of Dr. Sarah Dawson, who is the Director of Sustainability at the University of Idaho. Special thanks to Olivia Wiebe, who was our previous Sustainability Coordinator, who was pivotal in helping us draft our water conservation and management plan. So yeah, we published our plan for water conservation a couple months ago, but now the real work begins of actually putting the things on paper into action. So thank you.
Final award this evening is the Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories. Joey Nestergaard, the Executive Vice President of SEL, will be accepting. Several years ago, we featured SEL's printed circuit board factory at the summit. The SEL factory is located in Moscow and is one of the most environmentally friendly PCB, which is a really unfortunate acronym, PCB facilities in the United States. It's earned recognition from multiple Idaho organizations for its state-of-the-art water and energy conservation systems, air emissions management, and material recovery processes. We're very blessed to have SEL here on the Palouse, both in Pullman and Moscow and Lewiston. And this award recognizes the commitment and care shown by SEL for its ongoing stewardship of our basin's water resources. Thank you, SEL, and Joy. Thanks.
Please.
On behalf of our employers, I want to thank you for this acknowledgement. Community is a value of ours that being involved in the community, having this great factory that we get to show off to people from all over the world in the Palouse is an honor. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, everybody. That's the end of your politicians speaking. We'll turn it back over to the science of water once again. Robin. I think.
Thank you, mayors, and thank you also to our Water Advocate Awards. We're really excited. It's always fun every year to see, think about who's made a difference, who's made an impact, and be able to celebrate them. And I also wanted to just say thank you to outgoing Mayor Art Bedke. He's been mayor during some challenging time in Moscow, and so thank you. Okay, this is your service announcement. Just thanking everybody for coming. Again, restrooms are out the back or around the corner. There looks like there's still food and drink back there. We thank you to our sponsors and to our exhibitors. All right, and with that, I'm pleased to present Larry Matson, and I got to work with Larry a couple of years ago, actually, on the Palouse Basin project. He is currently the director of the Office of Columbia River within the Washington Department of Ecology. While attending graduate school at Central Washington University, Larry's interest in public service began as a planning commissioner in the city of Ellensburg. His career began as a land use planner, helping Yakima County draft its first comprehensive plan to implement the newly adopted Growth Management Act. Larry was elected to the Yakima City Council in 1999, serving one term. From 2001 to 2014, he worked on environmental documentation, permitting, and mitigation for the Washington State Department of Transportation. Notable projects include the I-90 Snoqualmie Pass East Mega Project and the four-laning of US 12 between Walla Walla and Burbank. In 2014, Larry was appointed the executive director of the Yakima Valley Conference of Governments, serving the valley for 4 years. He then worked for over 3 years with Jacobs as a client account manager, marketing engineering services to public and private agencies across Eastern Washington. Following his time with Jacobs, he spent 2 years with the State Energy Office, leading a team of renewable energy grant managers. And in February 2025, Larry was appointed director of the Office of Columbia River by outgoing Ecology Director Laura Watson. Please help me welcome Larry Matson.
Before I get started, thank you for that welcome. I want to know if anybody has ever successfully said no to Paul Kimmel. Can we talk in the back after the event tonight? I say that jokingly. I live in Yakima, and as I was driving Highway 26 here today, I was thinking how long I've known Paul. It's been about 10 years. And as you heard Robin mention, I've had a few positions then, and I can't quite seem to shake Paul off my tail. There he is. And I say that completely in jest, Paul. I am blessed to call you a friend. Thank you for the invitation today. I also want to extend Ecology Director Casey Sixkiller's regrets. He couldn't make it today. He was invited as well. He was appointed in mid-January, or began serving in mid-January, and then I followed about 2 weeks later. I wanted to share, at a recent executive meeting, Casey had shared 4 pillars that he would like ecology staff to aspire to during his time at our agency, and 2 of those I think are relevant today. He talked about us being a solutions-oriented agency and a community-focused agency. And the reason I bring that up is I know that the solution for the aquifer seems to be the Clearwater River, and so maybe working with the state of Idaho is going to take center stage, and ecology may take a backseat for a while, but I want you to know that myself, Patrick Cabbage, Chris Beard, Brooke Beeler, Jamie Short, and all of the team at Ecology stand ready, willing, and able to render technical assistance or whatever other forms of assistance we can provide. My work takes me across the Columbia Basin from the icicle drainage in Leavenworth to the Yakima Basin itself to the southeast corner of the state in Walla Walla with the Walla Walla Water 2050 plan and into the central part of the basin, the Moses Lake Othello Ephrata area with our Odessa groundwater replacement program. And you've heard several people tonight talk about collaboration and partnerships, and I just want to congratulate you. This is not easy work. It is not easy work to assemble a coalition, to hold one together in a meaningful manner, and to move forward and get things accomplished. So I have seen many partnerships fail. They are not easy. We would see many more of them if they were. And so kudos. I offer you heartfelt kudos and congratulations on your 22nd summit. This is hard work, and you guys are doing a great job. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry. About 2 weeks ago, I was at a conference, and Larry was there, and Mike Fappel was there. It was the American Water Resources Association Washington State Conference, and so we learned about the climate impacts to water resources, which isn't new, but just all over across Washington. And so we just really appreciate Washington Department of Ecology folks coming over here and hearing our voices, because we know there's a lot of voices in Washington. There's a lot of water issues, so thank you. Okay, with that, as you are all aware, water conservation is critical for the future of the Palouse Basin, and we are very honored to have the opportunity to hear from Kristen Zimmer, Conservation Program Manager for the City of Spokane Water Department. Under Kristen's leadership, the city is doing some great water conservation programming. She holds a bachelor's degree in natural science education from Eastern Washington University and is a certified irrigation auditor. Kristen leads programs that inspire responsible water use and community stewardship, creating behavior-based campaigns that make conservation accessible and help protect the shared water resources in the Spokane region. Please help me welcome Kristen.
Just use the screen. How do I actually use this thing? Just the button. Oh, okay. Should have practiced that, huh? Okay, thank you so much. Where did you find that photo? On the internet? Oh my gosh. I did not submit that. Well, I'm honored to be here today, so thank you. I think there's a lot of overlap between Spokane and the Palouse region. We're not too far away from each other. And honestly, I'm surprised you haven't looked at the city of Spokane for piping down some water over here. Just kidding, ecology. All right, but in Spokane, we love our lawns, present company excluded. There's a lot of pride people take in the green and the neatness and the sense of care. But that love comes at a price. So in the summer months, Spokane's water use soars to well above average. And overall, we are twice the national average. Last year was 199 gallons per person per day. And that's balanced throughout the entire year. But most of that water use is from irrigation. And it costs just 36 cents for 748 gallons of pristine aquifer water. Imagine that. But when water feels cheap and endless, it's easy to forget its value. That belief that water is abundant and always there when we need it isn't new. In fact, Spokane was built on it. So join me in a little ye olde water wisdom. I'll go through a brief history of water in Spokane. All right, so 1884, the water department was born, and it consisted of one pump in downtown Spokane that pulled water from the Spokane River and sent it out through about a mile of water main into Spokane. 10 years later, 1894, guess what? That river water was getting gross. So we've got to move upriver. So we moved about 5 miles up the river, built a new pumping station, and we're still pulling river water at that time. Oh gosh, and then the worst thing. While we were building this new pumping station, we encountered this really troublesome groundwater problem. I feel bad right now. I'm like, I don't mean to be bragging, I swear. But in the construction, they couldn't pump the water out fast enough to put the foundation in. And the water is ice cold and as clear as crystal. But let's keep pumping river water. Now, fast forward 1907, the little towns of Post Falls and Coeur d'Alene had grown, and you know what we did with sewage and garbage in those days, right? Put it in the river, someone else's problem. So the river quality had greatly declined yet again, and we knew we needed a new resource, so that's when we investigated that troublesome groundwater that we encountered and found it to be very pristine and clean and a wonderful water resource. Okay, and that's a view inside our well 1, 1907 hand dug. You can see the water in the aquifer. All right, but we didn't know where our water was coming from, right? It came from wells. Spokane water is from wells. You just dig some wells. And it's too pure. You could taste chlorine because there's not enough bacteria in it. Such a pain. And also, guess what? Supplies unlimited, 1948. Come on down to Spokane. Supplies unlimited. So what that creates is what happens to when you have an unlimited supply that's very inexpensive is, well, you use it as such. And so this chart here you're looking at is our typical consumption, our annual consumption. You can see the peak demand is typically July and August, and if we looked at that gallon per capita day number, that's 484, I think. 454 gallons per person per day versus winter use, 130 gallon per person per day. So that's a lot of water. And in Spokane, we pump on average 22 to 24 billion gallons a year. And we service the city of Spokane, but also some outlying areas as well. But where is all that water going? When we look at our residential water consumption, which is half of the entire use, is on a residential level. And the entire year of water, 83% of what you use is going outside. And it's not like we have a long spring, summer, or fall. It's very brief. And very little is actually used inside. And we're lucky to have plumbing standards that have changed, updated, efficiency standards, so indoor water use has declined just kind of naturally through that without any real effort. So why do we want to save water? What's the point in Spokane? I bragged about this aquifer when you guys are struggling. I'm sorry. So rude. Why does Spokane want to save water? Well, Much like you, we are in a high desert, right? We are not like Bellevue, although people in Spokane think we are, right? So here's an aerial view from a neighborhood, a wealthier neighborhood in Spokane, and you can see to the right is our natural landscape, what it would look like, and to the left is what we try to make it look like. Now, to have turf grass like this, you need about 1.5 inches per week during the peak season, averaging between 48 to 72 inches of water through the growing season. And how much rain do we get in the summer? Anyone? It was like was it 0.02 inches? Barely measurable amount, right? So all of that has to be supplemented with irrigation. 16.5 inches on average in Spokane a year. And we certainly don't get that in the growing season. I'll talk a little bit about our aquifer briefly. Spokane Valley Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer. Raise your hand if you're familiar with the aquifer over there. Pretty familiar. Right? So much like you, we have to share our aquifer with Idaho. But that's okay. For now. The aquifer holds about 10 trillion gallons of water, which is unimaginable, and it's recharged by area lakes you can see on there. So Pend Oreille, huge lake, very deep lake, Coeur d'Alene, Hayden Lake, all these very large bodies of water, and also the Spokane River recharge our aquifer. And 50% of all the water in the aquifer comes from the river, so the river is the largest source of water. And I always like to tell kids when I'm talking to them, the river and the aquifer are besties. They share water, so there's gaining reaches and losing reaches. And so one of the ideas is we want to protect our river and so we're not lowering the water table so much that the aquifer can actually recharge the aquifer in places it normally does. Right, so number one, we want to protect the Spokane River for many other reasons too. And objective two, stop building a system for 4 months out of the year. That's bad business. Right, we create an entire water system to meet that peak demand in July or August. It's about 155 million gallons a day. But that means we need the storage tanks and the pumps and the wells and all the infrastructure, which is very costly. All right, so in the last 3 years, we've built 2 new storage tanks. And anyone want to take a guess what that costs? Anybody? Water storage tank? For one, yep. About 20-ish million for both tanks. One was like 13. Very good. Remember, 36 cents for 748 gallons. I don't know where that math kind of works out, but it's very expensive to build a system, run a system for a very brief amount of time. So another reason we want to cut down on the expansion of our water system. Okay, so how do we do that? One idea is we need to understand what efficient irrigation looks like. And would you say, is there a difference between efficiency and conservation? Do you guys use them as the same? No. What's the difference? Victim number one. Yeah, exactly. Efficiency, using it wisely, less waste, versus conservation means more of like turning off the faucet, like just using less, period. So one way we look at efficient irrigation is through evapotranspiration, or ET. Not that one, sorry. So you need to understand how irrigation works, what's the real purpose of it, right? So we have a nice little blade of grass here, the devil itself. There's its roots under the soil. And we think about the water need as like a Cocktail glass, maybe. It's almost cocktail time for me. Or a glass of water is fine too. Okay. So an ideal situation, that glass is full, the plant has what it needs. The sun comes out, some of the water is evaporated from the soil, water is lost through transpiration, and that water in the glass lowers and lowers, right? So the soil is like the glass of water, and the roots are a straw, essentially. And now we have, some places have precipitation to refill that glass, and or irrigation, right? So that tells you how much water you need so the plant can survive. And just like if you went to your faucet and filled up your glass of water, you're really thirsty, how good is it to just keep filling that? Like it can only hold so much, right? And then the rest is just going down the drain. So it's just pure waste. Right, so the ET tells you how much water has left the soil, and water budgets are a way we look at kind of the supply and demand of both. So taking into account the local weather, the landscape area and square footage, the plant type, right? Grass is what you're going to need the most water for, different plantings, trees, et cetera, will have a different ET value. And then the efficiency of your irrigation system, which I can tell you from experience, there is no efficient irrigation system. If you work on irrigation, you know it is a life of pain and suffering. Well, all that to say, that's how we develop a water budget. That's the actual need to keep your landscape healthy and green. All right, water need versus water use. National average, outdoor, about twice the water need. When you need a cube, they're using 2 cubes. Spokane, we're gonna times that by 2 and have 4. We water about 4 times as much as needed. The goal here is to get people to efficiency as using 1 cube and then giving them a little wiggle room of 30% as well, because it's not an easy task. You look horrified. I know. And this is just another graph showing that basically the same thing. The green line is the water budget, what you actually need, and the blue is what someone was using. And so you have that large gap of just waste, right? Can people be efficient? Can it happen? Well, the city of Spokane owns 4 golf courses. This is one of them, and they had a renovation a few years ago. Brand new system, dedicated employees, right? But green line is the budget, blue line is their use. They are spot on. They are our model child. Same with one of our very popular parks, Manitou. They are hand watering there still, and so there's a lot of deficit watering, but much more efficient than a poorly managed irrigation system. Here's an example of a hospital we worked with over several years, right? You can see the peak in 22, just reactive, oh, it's hot, or there's a yellow spot, bump it up. And then kind of got them to ease up and look at the weather and the water budget a little bit more. And this is the same hospital, but kind of showing you the significant savings while they did not remove any turf, like nothing was changed, just pure efficiency. All right, so now I'm going to talk about a few of our programs. So our menu has been created, hopefully, we have something for everyone. Okay. ET is the science. We have a target, we have the ET, but it's not really actionable unless we can provide help. So that's why we have this menu of options for commercial customers, residential, and basically anyone and everyone. We do a lot of education, and we have rebates and a turf replacement program, which is our most popular. And I will say in 2022, City Council passed an ordinance just asking people to water on an odd even schedule and avoid the hours between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. It is not enforced. It's just an ask, but it's helpful, I will say. At least commercially, you can say, well, this is city ordinance, and people will take you a little bit more seriously. Our residential efficiency checkups, we have someone that goes to your house, has prepared a water budget for you already, inspects your irrigation system, looks at your controller, and tries to help you find ways to be more efficient. So in 2024, just that residential program saved about 5 million gallons. And just an example of how we use water in Spokane. This is not abnormal, but you can see this chart to the right. The green is the water budget amount, and the blue is their use, their consumption. Well, they didn't call us until October. And when we went out, we found a 70,000 gallon per month leak, right? That also shows you our water is too cheap because they didn't call us till October. And overall, our program has seen a lot of success. And looking at 2021 to last year, people were more reactive in how they watered, right? It's hot, bump it up, ooh. Or you just set it and forget it for the entire season. So over time, we were able to build a trust with residents and get them to trust their smart irrigation controller. And kind of the same thing with our fire department, all the stations installed smart irrigation controllers and saw a 30% reduction in water use in 2023. Which was 3 million gallons. And they've been a great community example for us. They practice odd, even watering. This is one example of landscape transformation, but most of them are just pure turf grass. Our highest ROI program is called the WaterWise Challenge. We invite residents to sign up and compete against their last year's water use, and offer utility bill credits as an incentive. So if you save 10%, you can get $50 credit on your bill. 20%, $100, 200, 30%, $200. And then we have a grand prize winner at $300. So we have, over the last 5 years, we've had about 3 million gallons in savings, and this is just opt-in, people that are kind of that enjoy the gamification of water. Over 300 households, and it's the cheapest program, actually. The most, I'm not gonna go there. Woohoo! Okay, we'll talk about our turf replacement program. It is super popular, I'm really proud of it. And again, looking at that picture, right? That's what it should look like. That's what we try to force it to be. It's like an English cottage garden. Does not suit our climate. Here's some examples of some projects we've had over the years. Before, after, way cooler, way more fun. Pollinator heaven. This was actually a pilot that was sick of just maintaining his lawn. It would get yellow, it's ugly, he didn't want to spend time. He entered the program and has a beautiful landscape that's much less maintenance and a lot cheaper. And just another example here, we have that carpet of grass going house to house to house. And they kept some of their turf, but also pulled in some native plants and different landscaping. So the program offers a small incentive, especially nowadays. It's $500 max on a utility bill credit, 50 cents a square foot to participate. But even with that, over its lifetime, it has saved 12 million gallons of water. And we've removed 10 acres of turf grass and replaced it with something ecologically beneficial. We've developed a lot of resources as well to make sure the program is accessible, because $500 is nothing nowadays, and especially in the world of landscaping. Do you know how much bark is? It's like $80 a cubic yard. I'm like, what? When did that happen? It's crazy. So we've developed hopefully a lot of resources for our customers to get them across that finish line. We have a guidebook similar to the Wisescape kind of guidebook and program, DIY video series, a virtual tour, templates, and a list of local professionals that are familiar with the program and can help you through the process. And most recently, we've added a designer at your door program, which has been very, very popular. So I have a landscape architect that after you enroll in 3 hours of education, you can get an hour with her, and she will whip you out a landscape plan in that time if you're ready. So it's been really great, very passionate individual. We also host classes through the growing season typically, and they keep growing. Last year, we had 100 people at each class at least, and it's just been really amazing to see the culture shift. And we even have interest from local universities. Whitworth came and did a study on Spokanescape versus turf grass and found that Spokanescape attracts double the arthropods as traditional plots. So the city goals, one is shaving the peak, you know that chart, shave the peak, shave the base. I feel like we're slowly making progress. It's hard when you have to factor in the weather, right? 2021 was crazy hot. And then I don't even know, a little bit wet this year. It's hard to measure, especially when you're pumping 24 billion gallons of water. But from the baseline, in 2020 compared to 2024, we're very similar weather-wise. It does look like we're headed in the right direction. And here's just another chart showing you, looking at ET versus pumping. So in its lifetime, we've saved almost 350 million gallons of water through various projects in the city. And our largest definitely return, well, golf course is obviously on this chart, but commercial program is significant in the water savings. Water-cooled equipment, it can be very wasteful. But I would say for a long time, water felt endless and inexpensive, so we treated it that way. But what we're learning is that the real value of water isn't in what it costs, it's in what makes it possible, right? Small acts, when multiplied by millions of people, can transform the world. All right, thank you.
Do we have any questions? We have a little time for some questions. Just raise your hand and we'll bring over the mic.
Sorry, Jack. Did you have there in Spokane particular individuals that were like the spearhead to get your Spokanescape started? Who was raising the alarm bells?
The 2015 drought is what really pushed the lever, and a few nonprofit organizations that put pressure on the city. Our Spokane River Keeper certainly is one. Gosh, I can't remember the others, but there was a lot of political pressure put on after the 2015 drought. So I'm thankful to them.
You mentioned the irrigation audits, and I wanted to mention there's a card out there where the mosque is giving free irrigation audits to citizens.
All right.
So grab the card and call her up. I had a friend who had her do that and it was useful.
Awesome, yeah.
Thank you.
Mosco's also doing irrigation audits. If anyone didn't hear that, sign up. Well, hopefully you've blown out your system by now.
Hi, I'm from a very small town here on the Palouse, and we are in a situation to where everyone has a certain fee for water every month. The interesting thing is if people use more in the summer, they pay less per gallon. Wouldn't it make sense if they paid 3 times as much as an encouragement to turn their turf into more sustainable landscapes, whether it's a rock garden? And I'm curious what the situation is in Spokane, and also same question for the mayors of Pullman and Moscow on that same issue.
Yeah, you get a bulk discount, huh? That's really not effective for conservation. In Spokane, we have tiered rates, so the more you use, the higher amount you will pay, right? Which is a conservation strategy to definitely implement. And I know there's purveyors in East Spokane, Spokane Valley, that their water use is billed annually, and it's in your property tax, right? So there are people, they have no idea how much water they're using, especially if it doesn't affect your pocketbook. You gotta have the numbers.
Is there a way, just a rough way to estimate how much more expensive it gets?
You can look at both cities' websites, the rates are published, so you can see the tier rates on both cities' websites.
Any other questions, sir?
There was an article in the newspaper this summer talking about the Spokane River running dry. And I was wondering if you could comment on which section that was and what was the cause and how long it lasted.
I'll do my best. Yeah, that was quite a dramatic photo if you saw. It's a reach of the Spokane River, a losing reach, loses to the aquifer. And it's actually in the Spokane Valley before Spokane. It's not uncommon that reach goes dry. It's happened in the past. And we lucked out with some precipitation like a week after that. And also, Post Falls Dam opened up and let some water out, and that helped a bit too.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Thank you, Kristen. It's really neat to see what other communities are doing, and I thought it was really neat when we were having our planning committee meeting, and Kelly Cooper, who is the City of Moscow conservation manager, she was really excited to hear what Kristen had to say, and I thought it just really speaks to the collaboration that Moscow and Pullman and other regions have. So, okay, on to our next speaker. Several years ago, thanks to generous support from the Latah County Commissioners, PBAC was able to secure an AmeriCorps service member to help drive water conservation awareness in Latah County. More recently, PBAC has repurposed this position to support its outreach and water conservation messaging. Erin Gazlani has called the Palouse her home for 10 years, coming to Moscow for college and staying for the beautiful landscape. She works in the community as a water conservation project coordinator for PBAC and spends her downtime volunteering and being outdoors with her family. Please help me welcome Erin.
Is this the slides? Excuse me. Awesome, cool. Hi, everyone. Let me adjust the mic here. I'm the shortest one who's talked so far. Okay. All right. So as mentioned, my name is Erin Ghislani, and I am the Water Conservation Project Coordinator for the Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee. And it's my job to go out into the community and just educate people on their water usage. If you talk to me at that table, you're going to hear this spiel a little bit, sorry. But I am just a community member talking to community members about ways that we can reduce our water usage because it's a collective effort. And, you know, we all share responsibility in that. So let's get started. Okay. So I'm going to provide just a real huge meta-analysis of all the outreach I've been able to do this year because I'm really proud of it, and we've been able to get some really good feedback and community response about what we've been doing, which to me shows that it was a necessary good, and I'm happy to put forth that labor of love. So, since February of 2025, I've been able to conduct 42 outreach events in our Palouse region, consisting of tabling, presentations, and lectures, and youth events. This outreach has been primarily done in Latah County, with recent, more heavy efforts into Whitman County, as we've been seeing a growing desire there as well. Typical ages is like 2 to 80 plus. We we reach a wide audience, and 2-year-olds know more about water than you think. So my goal with outreach, as always, is to make it pragmatic, to make it simple, and to make it interesting to learn. So the interesting to learn part in my head is grounding it in why it matters. So if you're not interested, you're not going to care why it matters, and then the conversation might be lost already at that point. So we'll start with tabling. Sorry, you're going to see a lot of me, but I did a good job. So we've had plenty of setups at our community events like Moscow Farmers Market. I've actually recognized a lot of people here from our tablings there, so it's really exciting to see just kind of familiar faces just continuing to be excited about the water issues that we have. Moscow Farmers Market, Tuesday markets, and Genesee Community Days, as well as doing stuff at environmental fairs like the Inland Northwest Earth Day celebration and UI's Earth Jam and Aquafest. So when I'm tabling, I am interacting with a really diverse range of people, and oftentimes it's like people's first introduction to PBAC or exposure to regional water conservation. So it's a great way to kind of just hammer down an elevator pitch as to why we exist, what we're trying to do, and what people can do as their first exposure to this problem. So presentations is going to be our next big portion of outreach that I've been able to conduct this year. I've been doing guest lectures at the University of Idaho and Washington State. That being said, it's actually 43 outreach events because I just did one at Washington State yesterday, and it went over great. Community presentations are going to be at like Neal Public Library in Pullman, Moscow and Genesee Libraries in Layton County, as well as Troy. I found that the lectures at the universities are a really great way to interact with the student population, because I feel like they're often an underrepresented demographic when we're talking about conservation and in these discussions, because they're just such a transient bunch by nature. But when I'm in these settings, I'm seeing that they are really interested in conservation, and there's still steps that they can take even if this is not their forever home. Because all that to say is, even if you leave the Palouse, having an understanding of water conservation is a net good mindset, regardless of where you call your home. So if I'm talking to students and they're only going to stay here for 2 years, that's okay. It's still a worthwhile conversation for everyone involved. And when we do, community events, they're typically aware of regional water conservation, so it poses a different kind of dynamic where it's a great opportunity for me to continue to build trust and intellectual trust as well, and kind of just continue to build those residential partnerships because they're seeking us out to hear what we have to say. My favorite one. Youth. Okay, so youth makes up the largest portion of my outreach this year. We've done tons of outreach in a collaborative effort, so I'm really glad to hear from the few speakers you've already heard already just how important collaboration is. It's crucial. It is arguably just as crucial as the water issue that we're facing. So it's been a real big pleasure to be able to work with organizations in our area to just continue to kind of fill the gaps where the other can't and just work together on educating people on water. So some of the outreach for youth we've done is at the Palouse Discovery Science Center. We were able to do some well models at their splash camp and built a continued partnership with the Palouse Discovery Science Center that will hopefully continue to expand into permanent water messaging hopefully in summer 2026. We've done programs with the Palouse Roots PCI Nature School. PCI is Palouse Clearwater Environmental Institute. We also did a multi-week summer program with the Moscow School District's Adventure Club in collaboration with the City of Moscow. Many youth events at Layton County Libraries, Moscow, Deary, and Troy, as well as a multi-week youth water education event with the Palouse Prairie Charter School in collaboration with PCEI and Palouse Conservation District. And the final one is a collaboration with Idaho Extension, where we took some kids out to Hordeman's Pond and other local waterways in the area and taught them about macroinvertebrates and how to identify area-specific water bugs. Okay, so youth gets their own slide of pictures because they're really great. And there's pros and cons of working with every type of demographic. I really like kid outreach because there's similar to students, there's a great way to kind of instill a conservation mindset in them very early on. At our brunch earlier today, I was talking with Daniel, and we both come from Southern California. And while he was speaking about his perspective or just like his growing up with a water conservation mindset, I felt very heard in that regard because I too was like in utero dealing with water conservation, and that happened till I left. But it was instilled in me at a very young age, and I took that very seriously, and it's been taken with me every place I go. So teaching them young, teaching them how to be more mindful about their usage, and to be able to ground it in their location for at least the next, the remainder of their adolescence for the next 17 years is, again, a net positive mindset. Also, kids don't phone anything in. They'll tell you very honestly if this is boring and this is not fun. And it's really refreshing to not have someone feign interest for your benefit. And you can change really quickly how you're adapting information to them and kind of take that feedback and change up what you can while you're trying to keep the attention span of a bunch of 6-year-olds who are ruthless. So our goal is to always make it adaptable and make it just information that they're interested in. Okay, so a great addition to outreach is feedback. And when I'm out in the community, I'm gaining feedback and community perception of the work that PBAC's doing, or just overall of regional water conservation, by simply just being present and interactive in my community. We've been having some themes of feedback specifically focused with our recharge plan, and that was expected, but these are things that we can kind of take back and regroup how we're disseminating messaging based upon the needs of our community. So themes and feedback are going to be concern about development and its increasing strain on water use. Overall, some people are just unaware of PBAC's function, so there's a great opportunity for me to quickly explain why PBAC exists the way it does and what its purpose is. Funding, people want to know where money's coming for things that are expensive, and that is also something that we take into consideration when we're asking for feedback, and overall just a lack of aquifer education. So there's unique opportunity, in my opinion, in outreach to educate and allow yourself to be educated, to teach, and to learn. And this vital feedback gives me the opportunity to hit home these key areas of clarification when I'm talking to community members that wouldn't have been possible if I wasn't open to the idea of being educated. So I encourage you all who are finding yourselves in a similar position like I am for your organizations to listen to those people that you're trying to educate, because we can all just kind of learn together and, again, continue the collaboration of water conservation. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Erin. I was sitting there thinking, Erin is just so fun, and I wish I could be a kid in one of these educational situations. So, okay, well, this is a great segue. Engaging youth in water is a critical component in our Palouse Basin water resources. As you recall from last year, a number of local schools and organizations are providing some valuable water conservation and awareness programs, including a recent effort thanks to the Palouse Conservation District. Here to share a bit more about their work is Jennifer Bois. Jennifer is the director of the Palouse Conservation District and has over 25 years of experience working with communities to implement conservation projects across the Palouse. Jennifer holds a master's in environmental science and a PhD in natural resources. Since joining the district in 2010, Jennifer has led efforts to build innovative partnerships that extend beyond local and state lines to tackle resource concerns at watershed and regional levels. One key initiative is the Palouse Regional Conservation Partnership, aimed at fostering cross-boundary collaboration to improve community engagement, soil health, water quality, and habitat. Outside of work, Jennifer enjoys camping and hiking with her husband and 2 daughters. Please help me welcome Jennifer.
Well, hello. Thanks for having me here. It's wonderful to be here at the 22nd Annual Water Summit. I think I've been here for all 22, but I have never been from this vantage point. So it's lovely to see you all from the front and not just from the back and the sides. So thanks for having us. Thanks so much for Paul and Mike for the invitation and the nice introduction, Robin. And thanks so much to Erin for all the work you've done. I know my children have personally benefited from some of the work there, and it was great to see some of those partnership photos, including last year's AmeriCorps service member, Luke, doing some of that partnership with you all. So today I have the honor and privilege to present a little bit on our youth engagement and water education. And this work really gets done by a lot of the staff at Palouse CD, including Mindy. Mindy's going to wave to everybody. Liz is here as well in the back. You may have seen Liz and Mindy at the booth when you came in. Please stop by the booth after and check out some of the student work and visit with us a little bit more, as well as a huge amount of work that happens to our AmeriCorps service members. So this year we have a wonderful service member named Olivia who's going to be working on some of this work as well. Oh, there we go. Okay. Did I? No? Can you advance here? Okay, perfect. I think I turned off my own view, but that's okay. I came prepared. So, sorry for future presenters. I just turned off your viewpoint. So, Robin will reset it for you. So a little bit about conservation districts. What are conservation districts? Conservation districts are basically everywhere you put your foot down on the ground, you're standing in a conservation district. So in Washington State, we have 45 conservation districts. Neighboring, just over in Idaho, you have the lovely Latah Soil and Water Conservation District, and they are throughout all of the U.S. and territories. So we are your local conservation partners. We are actually local government. And we are here to serve the community and be your trusted resource for conservation work. We are non-regulatory, so we are just here to listen to your community needs, chat with you about your conservation goals, and bring conservation services and programs to the community. And we are actually governed by a 5-member board. So thank you to all the voters who are out there. You actually elect 3 of our 5 board members locally, and then 2 of those members are elected by the State Conservation Commission in the state of Washington. So we really are, from the ground up, we're here. I feel like our job is to listen to the community, hear your conservation priorities and needs, and then we have this cool opportunity to go out and try to find those resources and bring them back to the community. So we are all grant funded, 100% grant funded at Palouse Conservation District, and we bring those resources back in a variety of different ways. So for those of you who are putting conservation on the ground, who are land managers or land owners, we are boots on the ground out there talking to you about your goals and helping you find resources to make good decisions on how you want to best promote your conservation on your land or the land that you're managing. And for those of you who are community members at large who just want to learn more about conservation, including our youth, we're there to provide those programs and services as well. And so we're going to talk a little bit about this. You can see some of our kind of on that arrow side, some of our land management services that we have, providing that technical assistance, often bringing financial assistance for folks to put conservation practices on the ground. And then we're going to focus in this presentation a little bit on fostering stewardship through our education programs, with the youth in particular. So, why does education matter? Well, I'm not going to tell you necessarily, because everyone in this room knows why education is important to them. So you all have an answer for why education is important to you. But what I can tell you is that we consistently hear that it's very important for our youth in the community to have water education and conservation education. And so we hear that often from the K through 12 level, as well as the college level, and into our general public. And we offer programs and educational and outreach opportunities for all of those different audiences. Today, I know you really want to hear about our youth programs, so we're going to focus a little bit on that. These are our K through 12 water quality programs that we currently offer. We offer additional K through 12 programs that focus on other natural resource concerns as well, or our priorities. But in particular, just through these programs alone, we reached over 2,000 students in partnership across the community last year. And that was in our 2024 numbers, but our 2025 numbers are looking to be about the same. There's a variety of different programs up here, including Drain Rangers, which is a partnership with the city of Pullman and focuses more on our stormwater education. We also have a variety of field-based programs like our watershed field days and our high school field days. We work with natural resource professionals across the whole entire region to get our not just K, but our high school students mentored by natural resources and ag professionals, and having them think about how they can get better involved. And they have a nice friendly competition that starts at the local and regional level, goes up to the state, and then the North American level through Envirothon, which we sponsor as well. And then throughout the last few years, we've had so much interest from the community on water quality, water conservation, what's going on in the Palouse watershed, that we rolled out a community science program called Confluence Crew. Many of you may have heard of Confluence Crew. Some of you might be Confluence Crew members. So that is a program that we rolled out for community members to basically adopt an area they're going to monitor water quality in, collect that data, report it back, and get together on a regular basis to look at what's going on in our local watersheds. What's really cool about that is now the community is collecting more samples than even our staff are through our research and monitoring program. So it truly is a community-fueled program. Last year, we were able to turn that program into something called Confluence Scholars, which was the high school equivalent of our Confluence Crew programs. So through our Confluence Scholars program, and again, I'm going to shout out to Mindy here. She did a lot of the work in pulling together this program, working with our local educators across the area and students to create a curriculum that was designed to get students in the field, doing water quality monitoring, thinking about what's happening in their local waterways and their community, doing that year-long monitoring, doing in-class investigations, looking at data, and having really informed and thoughtful conversations about water. So this program was funded through some of the funders you see up here. So we had EPA and Department of Ecology funding this program. It was intended to be a 3-year program. Last year alone, we worked with over 180 students between Pullman and Garpal. And unfortunately, in May of this year, or actually a little bit earlier than that, in March of this year, we found out the funding was cut. So we were 1 year into a 3-year program funded through EPA. And unfortunately, some of the funding priorities had shifted. And we had students who were so excited, teachers who were 3/4 of the way through their school year. And all of a sudden, we were like, oh, okay, now what? But the community really came together. We pulled together enough funding through the State Conservation Commission to keep this going, to keep these services going with students. And the students pulled off the first ever Watershed Summit. And so thank you. I know there's people in the room here that were there supporting that student work. And students get together and we're able to present their year-long investigations. And some of that work is in the back at the table. So we hope you stop by and can see some of that on your way out. But it really was a great program for students to kind of gain a better understanding of their local watersheds, get experience in what it takes to be a researcher, a scientist, an engaged community member around water, and learning about potential career opportunities in the field of environmental science and natural resources management. So that Confluence Crew program in the community then became Confluence Scholars, and now we have both running simultaneously. And I want to show you kind of a little bit about what that timeline looked like, because a lot of work went into this from our local educators, our students, our partners, and our staff to put together a really comprehensive program last year. So here's kind of the breakdown of the main ideas and the themes throughout the year with some of the touch points here. As I mentioned, this was intended to be a 3-year program. And unfortunately, we did lose funding after the first year. So what does that mean for our community? Well, it means that we had almost $500,000 to bring this to our local community for 3 years, and about $365,000 of that went away. It didn't just affect us, it also affected a lot of our community partners. Palouse CD does a lot of work to bring money and resources into the community and get it back out to other organizations. So with this program, we had money going to Palouse Clearwater Environmental Institute, Palouse Discovery Science Center, Washington Future Farmers of America Foundation, our Washington Envirothon, and the Phoenix Society. And unfortunately, we had to cut all those subawards with this program. But as I mentioned, we were able to pull off a full year for students. So that was really great. It is a great example of how much everyone is invested, students, teachers, partners, and making sure our students got a full year of this program. A few things, I guess, to think about, and we'd love to visit with you throughout the evening. We'll continue to be at the booth in the back. That even though the funding for this program has been cut, the full curriculum has been developed, we have teachers who wanted to participate next year and in future years that are still interested. We have that demand and are actively looking for opportunities to partner with our local community. So it's a great chance for us to come here today and say if anyone in the audience shares a passion for water, which I hope you do, and you have a passion for youth education, I think that there's some really cool opportunities that we could continue to partner with and deliver this program moving forward. Another really wonderful thing is we at Palouse CD are about to jump into a new long-range plan for 2026 to 2030. And as part of that, we did a really comprehensive scoping with the community about what their conservation priorities are. And what I'm happy to report back to you is that in that survey, we had 94% of respondents say that they thought it was very important for Palouse CD to deliver educational programming to our local community. So it was one of the highest rated areas. And a big part of that is the K through 12 youth education in particular. So I just want to leave that with us today, that yes, this is something that we all have been doing for a long time and that we've been partnering on. And things like this, hearing directly from the community, just help reiterate the importance that our community appreciates these efforts, wants us to continue. Looking forward, I know resources for education and water education with youth are probably going to be a little bit scarcer than they have in the past. So I welcome you to partner with us. Hopefully we can leverage some of our resources and continue to deliver some of these high quality programs to our students. So if you have any questions, I'll be here all evening. We'll have our booth in the back. Come see the student work and come collaborate and brainstorm on how we can keep serving our youth. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. That was really, really interesting, and it's neat to see too. Youth from K all the way to, 80s, 90s. Who knows? They have a great website, and I encourage everybody, if you're interested, just to sign up for their email list. They put out a lot of different events that are really interesting. So. And okay, this is your service reminder. It looks like there is still food back there. So there's food, drink. We want to thank all of our generous sponsors. And let's see, Petite Plates did the food, and Paradise Creek Brewery did the drinks. Thank you. Let's see. And the exhibits in the back. Yeah, if you have some time, take a look back there. And we also want to put in a plug, if you haven't filled out a registration ticket to win the low-flow toilet, courtesy of Moscow Building Supply, or an SYG gift certificate for some landscaping, now would be a great time to do that. Okay, well, next I would like to introduce Dr. Tim Link with the University of Idaho Waters of the West and Avista Award winners. So is Tim here? He's right there. Okay.
All right. Well, thanks, Robin. As Robin mentioned, I'm Tim Link. I'm currently directing the Waters of the West program at the University of Idaho, which is a graduate program offering degrees, masters, and PhDs in water resources. So every year we award anywhere from 1 to 3 Avista Waters of the West scholarships. This year we have 2 awardees that I'm really proud to announce. The first is Marina Steiner, who's actually the first time we've had a double award winner. And she's a doctoral student who is basically working on a water quality trend assessment for the state of Idaho through a University of Idaho team grant with the Idaho Water Resources Research Institute, and then whose project also focuses on assessing drinking water quality in Uzbekistan. So Marina's working with Dr. Greg Muller, who's in our Soil Water Systems Department, and Casey Bartram, who's at Terragraphics International Foundation. So again, congratulations, Marina, who's here somewhere. All right. And then our second awardee is also a doctoral student. It's Chase Reynolds. And Chase is actually looking at a topic which is very germane to Palouse Basin issues, focusing specifically on different water conservation practices and different successes and failures in adoption between the Moscow and Pullman areas, which of course, as a lot of people here understand and recognize, is that water conservation, of course, is the primary practice to really instantly reduce water pumping, demands on the electrical grid, and then local aquifer declines. Chase is working with doctors Kristen Haltener and Dilshani Sarath Chandra, who are both in social sciences at the University of Idaho as well. So I think Chase might be around 2, possibly, over there. Okay, great. Anyway, so there's you.
All right, congratulations to our award winners. Let's see, turning on this screen, is there any hints? Or maybe they just look over at the TV. Okay, we'll just do that. Okay, well, we are very fortunate to have 2 land-grant universities here, and we often benefit from this expertise to help us advance our understanding of the Palouse Basin groundwater, as well as other water issues in Washington and Idaho. Joining us today is WSU professor Sasha McClarty. Dr. McClarty's research leverages a diversity of tools and data to better answer 3 questions. How much water do we have? How much water do we use? And how much water do we need? Her main interest is in identifying and quantifying the interaction between human and physical systems, with a focus on groundwater and large-scale hydrologic systems. Currently, her research combines satellite and in situ observations of hydrologic systems into modeling and decision support frameworks over large regional scales, including the Columbia Plateau Aquifer in the Pacific Northwest and in Central Asia. She mainly focuses on complex groundwater systems where interdisciplinary approaches are necessary to understand both natural and anthropogenic drivers of aquifer change. She enjoys working at the interface of research and water resources management and has contributed to multi-science diplomacy efforts in the United States and internationally to advance the role of scientific research in decision-making. Here to share some of her most recent research, please help me welcome Dr. Sasha McClarty. Okay, please advance with this. Oh, goodness.
Oh, well, it's up there.
Okay.
Oh, it might not advance, though. Well, while they figure this out, I'll tell the story of this picture, which, Patrick, I keep pedaling around. My background is in using satellite observations to study groundwater systems, which is pretty much as removed as you could possibly be from the ground. And so when I first got to WSU, I reached out to Patrick Cabbage in the Spokane office for Department of Ecology and asked to do a ride-along for some of his annual well monitoring routes. And so we took this picture, and I continue to use it because it combines my 2 favorite things, the Palouse Hills and groundwater. So thank you for that day, Patrick. It gives me a background forever now. Okay, I will be presenting some recently published results. Most of the work I'm presenting was actually completed by my now graduated PhD student, Collins Asante Sasu. And I want to start off by setting a little bit of a regional context for our work that will then nicely translate into the next talk on the Palouse specifically. So the colored area here is the land cover of the Columbia River Basin in the United States portion. And my work studies the Columbia Plateau Regional Aquifer System, which I affectionately call the blob in the middle of the Columbia River Basin. So you can see that outlined in yellow here. And what I really want to highlight in this land cover map is that all of the cropland shown in pink is within that aquifer system. So when we talk about the amazing agricultural system of the Columbia River Basin, all of that overlies this aquifer. And right now, we think about a quarter of the water used for irrigation in this region is coming from groundwater, but that has the potential to change even significantly as we move forward. So in this study, we were simply trying to understand how groundwater has been changing in the past in this regional aquifer system, and really focused on Eastern Washington. So we asked, what are the historical trends and future vulnerabilities in this aquifer system, and do they vary by aquifer layer? So when we talk about aquifer layering in this system, I liken it to a cake where we have multiple layers, predominantly multiple layers of basalt with some unconsolidated material at the top. Our most spatially extensive and vertically extensive aquifer layer is the Grand Ronde. And I have to say, Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee, you guys do a great job because I teach senior level civil engineering students. And I always ask them, where does your water come from? And there's, the few that say the tap. But anybody who grew up in Pullman always says groundwater, and almost all of them say the Grand Ronde. So, nice education there. And before I proceed, I want to say that this work arose out of what we call the Long-Term Water Supply and Demand Forecast Project. This is funded by the Department of Ecology's Office of Columbia River. This is a legislatively mandated effort every 5 years to estimate current and future water supply and demand in the Columbia Basin. Larry Matson now has the honor of carrying the torch to guide this project. Today's results are out of the 2021 forecast project, so thank you for that. All right, this is back to the layer cake. When we talk about the layers of a groundwater system and our cake, we have, again, the Grand Ronde. Oh no, I don't know how to go backwards. The red button. Okay. So even within a single aquifer layer, we have these interflow zones, or the frosting, if you will, where water prefers to move. And when you want to pump groundwater, you need that well to access a place where there is actually water. All of the results I'll present today are based on ground-based observations. In other words, measuring the depth to water in a well. And as this schematic shows, no, I'm scared to push the wrong button, every single well is showing something a little bit different. So every time we take a measurement in a well, we want to know what aquifer layer that well is open to, so that we can understand if there's variations in how water is behaving at different depths in our system. So what we did for this study is we turned to Department of Ecology's Environmental Information Management System, EIM, downloaded all of the data that we could. We also got data from Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee, Walla Walla Basin Watershed Council, and a few other sources. And we screened the wells, which I'll talk about in a moment, and then grouped our study by what we're calling sub-area. Now, if you have your own well, or you could imagine somebody else's well, that well supports livelihoods. That well supports irrigation systems. That well provides water in your taps. It's really a personal thing. So we wanted to be able to present our results in an aggregated way, both to support regional scale management and also to not pinpoint one specific well as being severely declining. And we wanted a groundwater equivalent to watershed areas based on surface water boundaries, so a way to represent where groundwater is connected. So all of our results will be aggregated to these sub-areas that you see, and we have Palouse and the Spokane Valley Rathdrum Prairie aquifer system here. All of these colored dots are the locations of all of the wells that we use data from, and the coloring is based on what aquifer layer, at least the bottom of that well, is drilled into. So any red dot there is drilled into the Grand Ronde aquifer. I just want to spend a little time emphasizing how much work was done to clean the groundwater observations that we were working with. So originally we downloaded, and when I say we, I mean my student Collins, downloaded over 3,000 wells, data from 3,000 wells. Most of that was from the Department of Ecology's annual well monitoring route. I cannot overstate the importance of the Department of Ecology's long-term groundwater monitoring program. It is only through those data that we have a long-term understanding of how groundwater has been behaving in Eastern Washington and across the state more broadly. We filtered all of those wells to find locations that had enough data points to have statistical importance in our findings. And then we plotted all of the hydrographs, and we talked to Patrick and his colleagues and his counterparts in the Central Regional Office, and we did some data cleaning. So Patrick and Tracy Band in Ecology in Spokane looked through actual field notes for specific wells if things looked weird. We wanted to make sure that the trends we were calling trends were actually real and not just an airline break or something else that is causing wonky behavior in our hydrographs. So they pulled up handwritten field notes so we could ensure we're cleaning the data properly. In the end, we had 400 wells that had enough data of high enough quality from 2000 to 2020. Now, we did our analysis based on the spring high water level measurement. The idea of using the spring record is to capture the long-term as close to equilibrium condition as you could get in a pumped aquifer. You're never really at a true equilibrium condition, but this allows us to evaluate the long-term status of the aquifer. So you can see all of the red dots are showing the spring measurements. Where we have situations that are jagged like this, we have a spring measurement, spring, fall. And so we just filtered out for spring. That's part of the data cleaning process. All right, this is our first picture of what groundwater has been doing in Eastern Washington. The dark red is significant declining trends, light red is non-significant decrease, the dark blue is significant increase, and the light blue is non-significant increase. So, if you were my students, I'd say, what do you notice? It's the obvious thing that you should take away first, and that is that there's a lot of dark red. The vast majority of Eastern Washington has significant declining trends in groundwater across pretty much all of the areas that we have studied. We'll get into some of the blues in a bit. Then we took those point observations and we separated them out by aquifer layer. So in this upper left, you have that deep Grand Ronde all the way to the shallower unconfined or overburden layer. And I'm gonna walk you through what I want you to pay attention to on this slide. The first thing is that the most spatially extensive groundwater declines observed in the entire area are happening in the Odessa sub-area. Those of you familiar with this region know that this is a long-standing problem. These declines go back decades upon decades, and the Odessa Groundwater Replacement Project, currently being implemented, is working to offset some of these declines, and yet this is still the state of the trend from 2000 to 2020. Now, the next thing to note up here is that the steepest localized declines are happening in the Wanapum aquifer layer in the Yakima River Basin. We have trends toward 7 feet per year declines in this area. Now, our time period for this study was 2000 to 2020. As many of you hopefully know, the Yakima is in an unprecedented multi-year drought. They are at the end of a 3-year drought. And these declines are before that happened. So if you read news reports, a lot of the discussion around regions that surface water has been cut off in the Yakima, it'll say, well, we have emergency groundwater that we can use. But that's not necessarily a great idea if we already have these declining trends. In some areas, groundwater is an effective drought mitigation response, but not always. So our results show you really need to take care in understanding where groundwater is and isn't a good option. And I know Department of Ecology already takes care in this way. Okay, the next thing to note with this light yellow is that in some areas, we see opposite trends depending on which aquifer layer you're in. So in this case, the shallower aquifer layer has more positive trends, and yet deeper, we have more negative trends. So when you hear things like, let's just drill a deeper well, that's not always a great option. And then we also have some areas, I learned this recently, thanks to Patrick and Chris Beard and Jamie Short and Tracy Band. We have some areas like this positive trend here, just north of Pasco in Smith Canyon. Just because it's a positive trend doesn't mean we should go drilling new wells there. That actually could be, is likely a rebound response from actions that were taken in the 1980s to reduce severe declines. So when you start restricting water use, we see this response. So it shows up as a positive trend, but that doesn't mean that water is available there. Okay, this is just a different way to look at these results. This is by sub-area now, and there's the Palouse. What I want you to take away from here is, one, all of these plots look different, right? We're getting the picture that all of these aquifer layers are behaving and showing really different trends. Some of these areas have really large, elongated boxes. That means there's a large range of variability in the trends in that area. So you have some positive trends in that area, some negative trends. And then we see these outliers that get really steep declines. The Palouse Basin, all of our wells were showing really consistent trends, still negative, but close to 0 here. But the way a water level is increasing or decreasing doesn't tell the whole story of how vulnerable a region may be to changes in groundwater supply. So what we wanted to do was take those trends and compare them to the amount of water that is not just sitting in the aquifer, because we showed that the Grand Ronde goes down to potentially thousands and thousands of feet deep. You're not going to pump that water. Even if you could, the water quality would be too poor to use. So we wanted to account for existing well infrastructure in terms of what water is accessible to be used. So we evaluated the trends compared to what we're calling available drawdown, which is the amount of water from that spring static water level to just above the pump intake. So we said, if a well can access water based on where its pump intake is located, that's the amount of water that can actually be used. And then we defined some thresholds. So we said that if there is a 25% reduction in those available supplies, that's when your pump may need some maintenance. You need to start paying attention to your water supply reliability in that well. If that aquifer thickness, the available thickness, declines by 50% or more, you could have significant reductions in the use of your well, and anything more than that, you might need to discontinue use. This is probably conservative. This will really underestimate the amount of vulnerability in these areas. We can see impacts at smaller percentages of change, and these are just the equations that we used. So the main conceptual point here is that when we consider groundwater vulnerability, you need to consider the rate at which groundwater is declining, or hopefully increasing, and how much available supply is actually accessible by well infrastructure. And so the point of these plots is to show that in some areas, or in some aquifer layers, like in the Grand Ronde, we have a huge degree of variability in the amount of water that's available and in what the trends are showing us, whereas other areas, most of the vulnerability is driven actually by just a small amount of available thickness, even if the trend is not very big. So we aggregated these results by sub-area again, and I'll just draw your attention to the Palouse Basin here. So this is the number of years until that 25% threshold is met. So that's sort of our first step of, hey, this system is vulnerable. Again, we are aggregating these results across these entire large sub-areas, so individual wells may experience negative repercussions much sooner, and others may be more buffered depending on the local conditions for those wells. This is a key finding image from that forecast report. So this is showing the number of years to 25% decline in any aquifer layer, and you can see that in most of our sub-areas, we have 60 years or less until we reach that vulnerability threshold. All right, let's circle back. I don't know why it says vulnerability there again after the question mark. This was our initial question. Our key takeaways: groundwater is declining across the majority of eastern Washington. A lot of these declines are relatively insensitive to drought. In other words, we don't just pay attention to drought years, we pay attention to the past few decades over which these declines have been occurring. The average rate of decline is the most severe in the deepest aquifer layer, where it is the hardest to do something about. And those steepest declines are in the Yakima River Basin. So this year, in this multi-year drought condition, we have this compounding effect of long-term declines plus acute drought impacts. And this vulnerability metric we used is the balance of the rate at which groundwater is changing and the amount of groundwater that is accessible by existing well infrastructure. We see some sub-areas are driven by that limited saturated thickness, and others, the vulnerability is driven by the trend. You have to understand both of those pieces to know how to effectively combat the declines. And then the other final key takeaway is that the groundwater trends and vulnerability really vary from geographic location to geographic location, and from one aquifer layer to another. So there's so much heterogeneity in groundwater systems that has to be accounted for in how we think about management options. And these are regional problems. This is a regional aquifer. So what is happening in the Yakima or in the Odessa or in the Palouse Basin, it's all part of the same regional aquifer system. So what are we doing now? This was a groundwater monitoring training that we did. This is Tracy Band from Ecology. We're partnering with local conservation districts to train and provide equipment on groundwater monitoring so that the monitoring data is not just reliant on funded projects from universities or the funding available to Ecology, but to really put those data into the hands of the people using groundwater. We are now working to add in soil water potential, volumetric water content, and weather stations to where we're monitoring groundwater so that we can monitor the whole water budget at individual locations across the entire region. We have the equipment. It's in my office. I need wells with landowners who want their data to be collected. We are very sensitive to data privacy issues, but if you or you know of someone else who might be interested in this, please let me know. The more data, the merrier. Part of why we want to continue this monitoring is in this figure. So we have all of these gray dots. These are locations where a groundwater right, a permit to use groundwater has been issued. In these blue and green blobs, that's where we have long-term monitoring data of groundwater. So you see areas including between Palouse and Spokane, where we have a lot of groundwater rights that have been issued, but really limited monitoring data. Those data are fundamental to understanding how to move forward and where we are coming from in our groundwater picture. So we're continuing to expand monitoring through the current forecast project. Thank you, Larry. We are converting the USGS developed groundwater flow model from an annual time step to monthly so that we can better understand seasonal variability in groundwater, not just that spring measurement. An irrigator does not care what the March water level is if the August water level is too low to pump. So we want to increase our capacity to understand that. We have ongoing partnerships, primarily with the Columbia Basin Conservation District, to fund a groundwater web map, partially funded by OCR, I believe. And we're working to fund an interactive water resources vulnerability tool so we can overlay all of the aspects of vulnerability, including things like seniority of water rights, irrigation systems, to holistically understand how vulnerable our water supplies are and how best to move forward. So with that, I'll leave you with my favorite cartoon. Thanks.
Oh, okay. In your equations regarding the years to vulnerability, did you take into account population increases or changes in agricultural practices, et cetera?
I'll give my favorite answer, which is that was beyond the scope of the study. So no, we assumed the linear trend would continue into the future, which is, of course, an opportunity for further work. Yeah. There's a question over here.
A quick question on what you showed, water rights. Are those actual water rights beyond exempt wells, or does that include exempt wells?
I don't believe that includes exempt wells. That's just what is available. Right, so then the picture gets worse. So the question is based on the fact that if you're pumping groundwater for a small domestic home, let's say, using a small amount of water, you don't need a permit to use that water. So that picture does not capture potential residential use with individual wells. Yeah.
So will you also be measuring isotopes and other stable water chemical parameters?
Currently not, but I would love to do that. So if anybody wants to do that, let's do it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Sasha. That was really fun as a hydrogeologist to get to geek out on some data. All right, the Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee, or PBAC, is a cooperative organization focused on ensuring a long-term quality water supply for the Palouse groundwater basin region. As executive director of PBAC, Mike Fappel works with cities, counties, and universities to ensure this long-term quality water supply for the Palouse Basin, which serves as the sole drinking water source across portions of eastern Washington and northern Idaho. Prior to working in PBAC, Mike served as the Chief Administrative Officer for the Sustainability Consortium and also as a founding Board of Directors member and President of the Illinois River Watershed Partnership. When he's not promoting beneficial uses and conservation of water resources, Mike can usually be found engaged in some of the water-based recreation such as boating, fishing, or snow sports. Please help me welcome my friend, Mike Fappel.
Thank you, Robin. Here we go. Okay, this is my third time to make this presentation. And I promise you that if you have seen me make this presentation before, you're going to see some stuff that's pretty familiar. And I'm also going to promise you that I have some updates and we are getting some traction. So I always start with the fact that the reason there's a town here and the reason that there's another city 15 minutes away, Moscow, is because there's water here. And this is a dry area. We get, let's say 20 inches of rain a year. It varies across the Palouse and whatnot. But these are pictures. Make sure I get nope, that wasn't it. Is this the pointer? Okay. This is the big artesian well, the biggest artesian well that was downtown in Pullman. This is the little thing we have downtown to show where that well was, because artesian wells don't run forever. This is another, they drilled a well downtown in Pullman, and water came gushing out because there was so much groundwater that it was literally under pressure. There were artesian wells all over the Palouse Basin. There were artesian wells in Moscow, but I don't think they gushed quite as much as this. And when the European settlers came and started digging wells, this is what it looked like. So yeah, let's build a town there. Pullman was the artesian city. They had postcards, they had the artesian hotel. And like I say, most of you are much more aware of this than I am. But this is why we're here. This is why the towns were built. This is why they were good places to place the land-grant universities as well. So, and just to level set, when we talk about the Palouse groundwater basin, we're not talking about all of the Palouse. We're talking about the shaded area. And the boundaries that we have shown, if you've been to the Water Summit over several years, the boundaries have changed because I think Earl pointed out accurately, we have learned a lot about the hydrogeology of the region over the past many years. And as we learn, we adjust the boundaries of the basin. But it's not the whole Palouse. So we used to think that, for instance, the city of Colfax shared a groundwater supply with us, but they don't. We think that there's a tiny chance that the city of Genesee might, but that's only a tiny chance, so it's not in the basin right now. One thing that I think is kind of interesting is that we have the state line, and a relatively small part of the basin is in Idaho, but 40% of the water usage of the basin is in Idaho. And this is a softball question, folks. Why is that? Softball question. Because we don't irrigate. Oh, thank you. I heard somebody say. So agriculture is super important in the Palouse. Look out the window. You can probably see a wheat field coming out somewhere around here. We're up on a hill. But it's all dryland agriculture. So water usage, it's been pointed out, this is municipal water usage. Irrigation means people's lawns. It means parks, athletic fields, things like that. So I want to talk for a minute. These are the entities of the Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee, and we talk about the committee as it's a committee. They're out there doing this. The Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee is a bunch of people, and most of the committee members are here in the room, and I'm not going to ask them to stand up because some of them are pretty shy. Some of them are definitely not shy, but some of them are kind of shy. But I can look in the room and I can see folks from the cities of Moscow and Pullman who are currently on the committee, and I can also see some alums, let's just say over there, from the committee. I can see folks from University of Idaho and Washington State University. I can see our county folks from Latah, and I see you, Whitman, over there. Yeah, there was another one. He's probably... yeah, I see you, Whitman, back there. But the committee meetings, we don't go back in the corner of a room and lock the door and come back and say this is what's going to happen to our water supply. All of the committee meetings are open to the public. We send out notifications and our agendas ahead of time. If you'd like to be on the notification list, tell me, send me an email. I will put you on the notification list, and once a month you'll get the agenda. So email me, pbac@uidaho.edu, and you will get the notifications. You get on the list. All of our meetings are live, and the agendas include instructions to join remotely, or you can come join us. We meet at the UI facilities over in Moscow on campus. The meetings are recorded and the videos are posted to our website, as the minutes are also posted to our website when they're finalized. So we really try to make it public, and I hear people talking, well, Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee's figuring this out. Well, we're people. It's a bunch of people, and they're folks in our community. Their kids might go to school with yours. You might see them at Walmart. You might see them at the grocery store. So I just wanted to point that part out. So this is definitely a slide you've seen before if you've been here before, but this is pretty important if you're not familiar with the hydrogeology of the area, is that we have complicated hydrogeology. We don't have a big lake of water underneath us, and it's easy to draw that conclusion when we talk about our aquifer levels and our declining aquifer levels. It's actually very complicated hydrogeology. We have 2 aquifers, and that's been mentioned. So the upper aquifer is this lighter colored. The deeper aquifer is the deeper segmented lines. Most of the aquifer recharge comes from east of Moscow, from near the base of Moscow Mountain. And this is very different than what we were hearing about the Spokane River, where it has gaining stretches and losing stretches. Even though they're pretty close to us and the geology is very similar, this part of our geology is different. Now, why is that? Robin probably knows, and probably lots of other people. I don't know, but I know that it is. Okay, I didn't come here to be a geologist. I came here to, well, help us fix our water, and I'm going to get to that. So one thing that PBAC does, and really the core of PBAC's work, is our aquifer monitoring and reporting. And this is a map that shows, there's the red ones. This isn't great resolution, but it's a lot of information on one. But there's a bunch of wells, and they have a little tube down in them. I actually set one out at our table so you could see what a data logger looks like. But the data logger sits in that well all year long. And once a year, Mickey goes there. Mickey, you still back there? You don't have to raise your hand, I know. Okay, but Alta Science and Engineering helps us tremendously with this, and Mickey and Rupal currently are handling the data collection that's the basis of the management decisions that we jointly make. So she pulls these things up, she plugs it into the computer, and you get a hydrograph for each well, which is a measurement of water depth over time. Is that a good definition for a hydrograph? Not bad? Okay, close enough. And here's what I want you to see about the hydrographs. The shallow, the ones that have a red number, they're not declining so much. Those are in the shallow aquifer because the larger entities don't pump as much water from the shallow wells. If they did, they would go dry. And that would be a problem for people who depend on their private wells. The ones with the blue numbers, they don't look exactly the same, but they all look kind of similar. And this is the decline in the aquifer that we're talking about and that we're dealing with. So when all of those hydrographs are composited, this is what you get. And this may look familiar to you, but this is different than the decline in aquifer graph that I showed last year because it has another year's worth of data, and that makes it better data. But it's the same data. So if PBAC was to have a single goal, a single thing that we're trying to accomplish, it would be to make that graph stop going down, okay? Everybody gets that. So we're still talking about approximately 8 inches a year of aquifer decline. And that's, but the monitoring and reporting is the very core of what PBAC does, and it's a very important data set to our region, to the pumping entities, to the governments, to the staffs that manage water in the region. Now, the groundwater management plan was adopted in 1990, 35 years ago. Who was paying attention? Who in this room was paying attention in 1990? Not me. I had never heard of the Palouse in 1990. Anybody? A few people. Where's Paul? Paul was, John was, a few people. Earl, yes, definitely. So the groundwater management plan was the pumping entities in the basin agreeing as a group to limit our future pumping. And we have limited our future pumping because what this shows us, the straight lines are population of the cities of Moscow and Pullman, and the dotted lines are the water usage by the cities of Moscow and Pullman. So the water usage over time, yeah, there's spikes and there's a little bit ups and downs, the water usage has remained fairly constant despite a significant population increase over time. So we always want to look at, well, who's using what water? And we did talk a little bit earlier about per capita water use. And per capita water use can be useful to compare, but it can also be very unuseful to compare. So please don't compare per capita water use inside the Palouse Basin. Just don't do that. The cities are not set up the same. The campuses are not set up the same. And it's true that University of Idaho deserves all the credit in the world for their serious focus on water conservation. And it was not just the Office of Sustainability, although the Office of Sustainability led that, but that was a campus-wide effort. That was, I forget how many committees we had, I forget how many meetings we had, but that was a tremendous amount of leadership. And so University of Idaho, yes, they do reuse water, and they reuse City of Moscow water and irrigation, and good for them. That's wonderful. And someday I think Pullman and Washington State will do something similar, but don't compare them on a per capita basis, because that's just not fair, because they're not set up the same. So I've been with PBAC, like I said, this is my third Water Summit presentation. I've been here getting on to 2.5 years. And we're starting to get some traction. And this work goes so slow. It is so incredibly slow. But what I think the PBAC members are starting to find out is that I am so incredibly stubborn. And you folks, you don't know how stubborn I am yet, because I haven't even got started being stubborn. But this stuff takes a long time to do anything, but we have made progress. So one progress that we've made is continuing our monitoring and reporting, and we're actually tweaking the monitoring and reporting program with Robin's help and Derek's help, and like I said, Rupal and Mickey's help, to ensure long-term continuity of a high-quality data set. And we're doing that. You know we're doing it because you're a part of doing it. Another thing we've done is increase our focus on water conservation outreach. And you heard Aaron talk. Aaron has taken a program that we started less than 2 years ago. We started it, and she has really got it off the ground and got it running. She came in January, and I said, well, Erin, you know, it's the Palouse outreach. That doesn't really happen until maybe June or something, but we'll see. And she's like, what are you talking about? And she has done, is it 44? 43 events so far. Can anybody here even name 43 events in the Palouse? Okay, see what I mean? She's taken some limited opportunities for outreach and really taken this program off the ground and institutionalized it. And focusing on water conservation is the right thing to do for a lot of reasons. But we are talking about importing surface water, and at the very least, your own house needs to be in order if you're going to try to take water from somewhere else. Focusing on water conservation outreach we're really getting going on that, and we're going to keep doing it because we've got a lot of room left in water conservation. Another thing we're doing is that we have funded a University of Idaho research project that is launching now and is hoping to establish the best areas for passive aquifer recharge inside of the basin. And we know that our opportunities are limited, but we think that there are opportunities, and this is some, well, I've got a slide. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then and this one, there is quite a bit of interest in, and a lot of people want to talk about this. A lot of people think that this is most of what we do, and okay, yeah, it's what we spend more money on than anything else. But we are absolutely think we've potentially narrowed it down, that our supplemental water supply that will be necessary to eventually flatten that line and stabilize the aquifer is potentially a diversion from the Clearwater River near the confluence with the Snake. So I said there's a PBAC-funded study that's been launched, and I'm glad to see that Tim Link is here because maybe you can explain it if somebody has an actual question. But it involves sampling private wells from willing owners inside of the, well, oh crap, let's go back. Okay, so the green shaded area is the watershed. The brown shaded area is the geologic area of interest. The red dots are wells that we would like to sample. If you live out there, or if you know people who live out there, if you would like to help us contact willing landowners, we'd appreciate it very much. We do have a few flyers printed with information or that, or once again, you can email me at pbac@uidaho.edu if you think you might be able to help with that. We have started sampling. We're doing pretty well, but we do need more wells to sample to make these data of high quality enough to be useful. Anything else, Tim, on that? Not right now. Okay. I guess I did okay. So, talking about a supplemental alternative water supply. The one on the left is a cover page. Does anybody recognize the study of a pump storage project at Union Flat Creek in 1973? Anybody heard of this one? Well, thank you, Mark. Be shocked otherwise. In 1973, the United States Army Corps of Engineers, and actually Tyler mentioned it, or maybe it was this morning. In 1973, the United States Army Corps of Engineers said, hey, folks, we've got your water fixed. We're going to also provide a bunch more electricity. And oh yeah, there's going to be a warm water fishery. and it's going to be about halfway between, or actually 2 reservoirs, about halfway between Pullman and Hawaii. And oh yeah, sorry, your farm's going to be underwater, and yeah, you guys are going to have to move. Okay, well that one was so dead that that most of you have never heard of it, and that was the last big attempt to fix our water here. But they didn't do a good job of it, and we're not considering it today. Actually, what we're considering is in a lot of ways similar, because the water in the Snake River a lot of it came from the Clearwater. But we're not proposing to put a bunch of farms and houses underwater without telling anybody. It's just not a good idea. The one on the right, there I go again. This is, I apologize for the poor resolution, but this is what I had. This is from another Corps of Engineers document from 1989. And this one shows, it says proposed alternative municipal water sources in the Palouse Basin. And it shows one is a reservoir at Laird Park, or Laird, is Laird a town? Laird Park is where we take the dogs in the summer sometimes, to me. It's where the Boy Scout, right near where the Boy Scout camp is. So a reservoir on the Palouse River. Here's another near the city of Palouse, a reservoir. Here's a Snake River pumping station. And here's one from Dvorak. That'd be cool. Let's just pipe it in from Dvorak. We're also not looking at that one right now. But this is from 1989. A lot of these things, there have been so many proposals and so many studies over the years. We have, when I first attended a water summit, this is my third one, so 4 years ago, I guess 3 years ago, we were talking about the not importing water. We were talking about using only the local streams as supplements, and those numbers, we've looked at them harder, and those streams are small, and the treatability is low because of siltation and whatnot. So we're not currently looking at those. But none of these things are off the table. Just because that's not what we're focusing on right now, that doesn't mean that they won't be developed at some point in the future. So this is a long-term project. So, and some of you have seen this other places, and we have our poster. So this is what we're looking at right now, which is, we'll talk, the next person will talk more about this, but we are looking very, very hard at a potential diversion from the Clearwater River to the city of Moscow, which would then be treated and either injected back into the aquifer or piped over the state line. And I can explain that pretty simply, but that's not simple. There's nothing simple about it. But it's only one thing, and a lot of us have done things way more complicated. So that's what we're looking at right now. So stay in touch. Like I said, our meetings are public. Our minutes of our meetings, videos of our meetings, we really try hard to make all the information accessible. And that's what I have to say. Do we have any time, Paul? Any questions?
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. I'm always interested in this part of PBAC Summit. But given the dysfunction and shutdown of our federal government, what is that, how is that impacting PBAC, number one? And to what degree, I mean, these are two very separate questions.
Well, I'll keep that one.
All right,
I can
good.
do two.
Good, you can
Otherwise,
do
I'm going to
two.
have to write them down.
All right, and number two is, we've all been watching what's been going on with the wind farm issue in the Palouse area, especially around Kamiak Butte. And there's been a lot of pushback from the community about wind farms. And I'm not saying that water acquisition is as controversial, but of course it is every bit as controversial. So can you give us just your perspective on those two issues?
Number one, federal funding. PBAC was impacted by federal funding this spring at right about the same time Palouse Conservation District was, because we had an AmeriCorps member, and they paused at the time. They said they terminated the program, and Erin was an AmeriCorps member, and then one day she wasn't, and we watched the news, and we weren't all that surprised, and we were prepared, and we created a staff position, and because the PBAC members understood the situation, they felt this was important to make a larger investment because the AmeriCorps is a subsidized program. So we created a staff position and made it a year-round instead of an 8-month AmeriCorps. So that happened. As far as future water project funding, we haven't gone there yet. We don't have any water project funding to jeopardize. So that's not something I worry about today. We haven't identified those funds. And the second, okay, see, I said I could do three, but.
Yeah. Well, pushback from the federal government was one thing, but the other thing is pushback from locals who would oppose this idea. How is PBAC looking at dealing with those folks?
There's only so many people in the Palouse, and we talk to everyone that we can. We listen to feedback. We want to know what people's concerns are. If we hear a concern, we first thing we do is listen to it, and then we potentially will address it. We use good science. We use transparency, and if there's a legitimate reason to not bring water from the Clearwater, we might try to mitigate that. I don't know yet, but we're going to use transparency and openness and honesty and good science. That's the plan so far. That's all I got. Any other questions? Sir? And I'll stay after the meeting if anybody has any other questions that come to mind.
So a quick question for you. In the case of water mitigation or looking at things, stormwater retention, so we have a tremendous amount of stormwater running and flowing everywhere. Is it possible, or have you looked into the ability to maybe centralize or collect stormwater in different areas and see if it recharges the aquifer? The aquifer opportunities, the opportunities for retention ponds to recharge the aquifer, or in other parts of the country, I've actually dealt a lot with what's called rain gardens, which is, are you familiar with rain gardens? I've heard the term.
Okay. Well, in a lot of places, those can be effective ways to mitigate stormwater runoff and help with levelizing stream flow and levelizing aquifer recharge. Our opportunities are very limited to do that here because of the geology. So if you if we built a pond right out in front and let the water flow into the ground, my understanding of the hydrogeology around here is that little or none would actually reach the aquifer because of the heavy clay and basalt layers underneath us. Instead, it would eventually make its way into the Palouse River. And by eventually, I've heard things like potentially thousands of years. It depends on where you're standing and everything. So the opportunities are limited to do things like that here. The study being done by University of Idaho, if successful, will tell us what places that might be available and might be helpful. Excuse me. We good?
One more.
One more, okay.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have an estimated cost of what it would take to bring water from the Clearwater River up to Moscow and then distribution from there?
We don't yet. We do have a preliminary study from 2017, which would show something like $100 million. But please remember, that's capital cost, and that's construction costs have gone up a lot in the last several years. But capital cost is one thing, operating cost is something different. Energy costs have also changed, and we're talking about quite a grade to lift water. So any surface water we use is going to be a lot more expensive. How much more expensive? I don't have that number. It'll be base case scenario, maybe something in a year, but I'm not promising that we'll know that in a year, just because of the frustratingly slow pace that this work naturally takes. Excuse me.
Just so curious about advocating for policy. I haven't heard anyone talk about that today. Like, why aren't we looking at mandatory restrictions and other ways to save water?
Sure. So the cities of Pullman and Moscow do have mandatory restrictions. The city of Moscow had an irrigation restriction a few years ago. 3 years ago, the city of Pullman implemented a more strict irrigation restriction. And a lot of us are really interested in finding out how successful that has actually been. So we can, and I'm looking at you, but we are kind of looking forward. We think with 3 years of data, we may be able to determine that. So there has been some policy stuff. PBAC is not a policy-making organization, but we're very interested we're interested in everything, whether it's mandatory or recommended. So I don't make policy recommendations.
Okay, I think that's all.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. It's always really interesting to get a lowdown on the basin over the last year. And I've been in this basin for a really long time, and I've been attending PBAC meetings for a long time. And I really want to give kudos to PBAC because they've really changed over the last 20 plus years, where they've really focused on making a difference. And the people that are in PBAC really do care about it. So you're in good hands. All right, our next speaker, as Mike shared some about the critically important work underway at PBAC, we wanted to provide you with a little more information about the work to identify that additional water supply for the Palouse Basin. Joining us today is Jeff Hansen, Senior Water Resource Engineer with HDR Engineering. Jeff is a Senior Water Resources Engineer with over 25 years of experience working with water utilities in the Pacific Northwest on planning and design of drinking water supply, wastewater management, and reclaimed water programs and projects. Please help me welcome Jeff Hansen.
All right, thanks, Robin. First of all, kudos to all of you for hanging in the long haul. I also recognize that I am the last thing standing between you and the keynote speaker, who we're all interested in hearing from. So I'll keep this moving right along. But yes, I'm following up where Mike left off, just to provide a little bit more detail on the current work related to the supplemental or alternate water supply project. So this effort that PBAC has launched on, and which is partially funded by an Idaho Water Resource Board grant, began earlier this summer, and we really truly are on the front end. So I want to kind of manage expectations on what you're going to hear this evening, and just recognize that we're starting the effort. But that's why we wanted to be here today, to tell you what we're doing. And also, it's important to remember that fundamental to this work is the underlying tenet that the Palouse Basin Aquifer System is intended to remain as the primary source of water supply for the Palouse. But there's a recognition through all of the work that PBAC and the community has done through the decades, with the declining groundwater levels that Mike discussed, that there's a need for a supplemental water supply to ensure long-term water sustainability. And as Mike mentioned, there's been a lot of study, a lot of work done on exploring various options, and currently the option that appears potentially the most feasible is pulling surface water from the Clearwater River and bringing it up into the Palouse. However, more work is needed to really understand what that would take. I mean, we can conceptualize it fairly easily, but what are the challenges? How do we mitigate those? What are the costs? The cost question came up. All those things are what we're working on right now. And it's also important to remember that how would this supplemental surface water supply be used? There's a variety of ways. It could be directly used by the communities, either in Moscow and or Pullman, or it could be used for aquifer recharge, or a combination of all of the above. Again, all things that we are looking into. So again, I mentioned the study has just launched. We're working throughout the winter and into the spring, and we hope to have some preliminary results certainly by this time next year. I know Mike mentioned things move on a glacial pace. We're trying to move it quicker than that. All right. So I was tasked this evening with laying out to you what we are doing in this study. And I want to highlight the 4 primary project elements that we're working on. Those are comprised of a water supply assessment, conceptual design development, permitting needs identification, and then stakeholder engagement. So I want to walk through each of those components. So first, water supply assessment. So this project begins with contemplating pulling water from the Clearwater River down by Lewiston, just upstream of the confluence with the Snake. So part of our work is to analyze long and short-term variability in that supply. What's the water that's available? Also, legal issues, water rights. There is a segment of the Clearwater just upstream of the confluence that has a minimum stream flow reach intended to support environmental purposes and fisheries. We don't want to interfere with that. We want to understand what those challenges are. It may pose seasonal limitations on when surface water could be obtained from the Clearwater, or it might mean that other mitigation actions are needed to utilize that water. So we need to investigate all of those issues. There are also legal and administrative considerations when removing water from the Clearwater Basin and up into the Palouse. So part of this work is engagement with Idaho Department of Water Resources, the Water Resources Board, Fish and Game, to discuss all of those issues. We're launching on that effort right now. Right on the heels of the summit, we'll be having some of those conversations. We'll lead into analysis as we get into the winter. So that's the water supply assessment, understanding better the source and what it could mean for a potential diversion. Then that leads into conceptual design development. This is the same figure that Mike showed, and I'm just showing it again to highlight the various infrastructure components that would be required for this type of project. This is the engineering part of the work. The types of things that we will be looking at are a diversion intake structure on the Clearwater, identifying potential locations for that. A part of that, again, goes back to water rights, stream flow issues, but there's also physical constraints, proximity to power. What are the best areas geographically for that type of infrastructure? So we'll be exploring alternatives there. And then we would have approximately 40 miles of piping to bring that water up from the Lewiston area up into the Palouse, not an insignificant amount of piping infrastructure. And of course, we've got to get up the hill, right? So extensive pumping and most likely storage tanks along the way to facilitate lifting water to that extent over 40 miles. The envisioned route would follow the highway, but we want to look at alternatives that might allow us to minimize cost, explore other solutions. So that again, there's alternatives all along the way, every step of every component of the project. Once that water is up in Moscow, there's a recognition that that water would have to be treated because we're talking about utilizing surface water and somehow combining it with a groundwater system, whether that water is directly used by the municipalities, the universities, or if that water is introduced into the groundwater system. So part of this work is exploring water chemistry, understanding compatibility, level of treatment that would be required. And then how that water might make its way to Pullman, either for direct use, or Pullman may receive a benefit if this water is recharged into the groundwater system, and exploring those options and understanding those implications. So again, multiple end uses. So this is conceptual level design, defining alternatives. It's what we call a tabletop review, defining the alternatives and then comparing them. Comparing them against multiple criteria. It's not just cost, although that will be a significant one, but we want to look at the full range of factors that would inform this type of decision for the Palouse. So environmental concerns, property, right-of-way, acquisition, hydraulic considerations, and constructability. All those different types of factors we are starting to identify and frame the decision-making process. In conjunction with the, let's call it the engineering form or part of the work, we will also be identifying permitting needs that will have to be met along the way. This is a very pragmatic, stepwise process. It begins with identifying what those key regulatory triggers might be and whom might we need to talk with to identify those and identify mitigation measures. So again, we're just launching on that phase of the effort. And then as we get into defining the engineering alternatives, there will be boots on the ground work to understand potential environmental impacts, cultural impacts of the different alternatives. So there will be some reconnaissance level work to gather information and assess those issues. And all along throughout the course of this project over the next year, very extensive coordination with various state and local agencies and the Nez Perce tribe. One of those key permitting issues or considerations is around water rights. I mentioned that down in the Lewiston area, there's a minimum stream flow reach. So we will be exploring with the state what those requirements might be in that reach and what the different pathways would be to secure the water rights that would be needed. We're talking about a volume of water on the order of 10 CFS, 10 cubic feet per second. That's approximately 6.5 million gallons per day if it were to be pumped every day. So that's kind of the range that we're looking at. And so there are options when it comes to water rights about transferring existing water rights, acquiring those, or applying for a new water right. So again, this fall, we're going to be working with the state to vet those various pathways. Key to this is a potentially massive project, both in its scale and its cost, but also in who it might impact, both in the Palouse, but all along the way from the Clearwater. And so PBAC has recognized the significance of that and therefore the importance of stakeholder engagement, which is why this component of the work has already begun and has come before the technical analysis. So PBAC is committed to working with a wide range of stakeholders that are at play with a project like this. That includes the state regulatory agencies that I've mentioned before, but also very, very importantly, the Nez Perce tribe, stewards of the Clearwater River Basin and the area as a whole, as was mentioned by one of our kickoff speakers, Chairman Wheeler, earlier. And so PBAC has already engaged in those conversations. PBAC leadership has met with the Nez Perce, then brought on the technical team to meet with the Nez Perce about a month ago. So those conversations are happening now. And the importance of that is not only to inform others of the nature of the study, but to learn. We want to listen and learn what the key issues are from all entities, including the tribe, and then that informs our work. It informs how we evaluate various alternatives. So PBAC has, as a part of its operation, a stakeholder engagement group, and that group, many of whom are in the audience here this evening, that group is critical to steering that part of the work. And so again, there's some really key fundamental elements to that stakeholder engagement, including understanding the historical, cultural, and political context, because again, we're not just talking about the Palouse, but we're talking about the Clearwater River Basin and in between here and there. A big part of this is not just engaging with organizations or entities, but very personal one-on-one interactions. So our team, our stakeholder engagement folks, as a part of our team, have been engaging in those very direct personal communications and logging questions, concerns, challenges that a wide range of people are noting. And so through all of that, we're communicating, but we're mainly listening. We've wanted to start that work now so that it can inform the work as we move forward. Project timeline, I hit on this very briefly at the beginning. So even though it's shown a little bit further, stakeholder engagement has begun and will then continue throughout. In terms of the technical work, that's beginning right now on the heels of the Water Summit with the water supply assessment. After we do that work this winter, we will engage in the conceptual design development and the permitting needs identification that will take us into the spring and the early summer. And the plan is by midsummer, third quarter of next year, we'll have preliminary results on the feasibility of this project. So with that brings me to the conclusion of what I wanted to speak to this evening. My contact information is there. Again, we are part of the team that's supporting PBAC in this, so questions can come to PBAC, they can come to me. I'll be here with Mike and others at the table afterward to talk in more details, but also we can open it up for questions.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Curious if you know off the top of your head, are there other projects around the nation that mirror what we're trying to do here on the Palouse, potentially going up 2,000 plus feet of elevation? And I'm curious if you have the knowledge to what extent the success was on those projects, and
right,
how that looks for us here.
I don't have an exact match when it comes to that component of the project, that vertical lift, but I can tell you there are plenty of examples of what I would call conjunctive use, where you've got a groundwater basin or a surface water basin, and then later brings on another type of source, right? And there are significant engineering cost challenges related to that. A classic example in the state of Washington is Tacoma, city of Tacoma, all right? Which has a conjunctive use of a surface water supply and groundwater. And what are those key issues that they have had to deal with, as with anybody who has to, and this project will have to look at it as well, and that's the compatibility of those surface and those groundwater supplies for public health safety, safety of infrastructure, et cetera. So those types of issues, this is not new. This project is not the first by any stretch for things like that. Yep.
Is there any consideration on the merits of using treated sewage water to supplement any other purposes for which groundwater is currently being used?
So that concept of reclaimed water use has been explored in some of the previous work by PBAC. That's not included in this current effort, but I do know that has been looked at in the past. And I don't know, Tyler, if you want to speak to that at all, or?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. Thank you. Tyler Palmer, Public Works Director for the City of Moscow and the current chair of PBAC. The City of Moscow has a reuse system in place, and that's why when you saw the graph that Mike put up earlier where the U of I domestic is so small, their utilization, it's because almost all of their outdoor irrigation is done through effluent from our treatment facility. And so about 100 million gallons annually goes from the City of Moscow's effluent to the University of Idaho. There are a couple challenges for us with providing more in that storage needs, and then that 100 million kind of represents most of our flows during the summer because we have this weird thing where our flows are lowest during the summer months when the need is highest. For the City of Pullman, that's been explored pretty extensively. They have some different requirements than the City of Moscow has based on the flows that they have to release. And so the amount of water that they have available for effluent based on us just being smaller communities, and then the differences in the geography in that they have to pump up more extreme hills and further to the places where it could be utilized. When you look at the cost per acre foot, it just really isn't the most beneficial project. So when you look at where do we get the most water, the most bang for our buck, that just really doesn't pencil out for the City of Pullman, but it does for the City of Moscow and has been used since the 70s.
You mentioned water rights in the context of taking water out of the river. How do water rights work if the point of diversion is in Idaho and the place of use is in Pullman in Washington? That's one question. Also, California lifts water close to 2,000 feet to get water to LA from the California aqueduct.
From the project, yeah, that is true. That's a good example. In terms of water rights, this is one of the things that we're going to be looking at, right, in which may be a constraint or a limitation in point of diversion from Idaho and water then being used in Washington. So we're looking at that, and this is one of the reasons why the use for groundwater recharge may end up being one of the more palatable reasons or uses. Yeah.
Oh, I'll hold it. That's okay. Some of us might have concerns about injecting treated water into the aquifer after the treatment plant. And I suppose that's a controversial subject about how contaminated treated water is. And I was wondering what health or scientific experts, if any, do you plan to incorporate into your study to offer that in the result as to the pluses and minuses of injecting treated water with its contaminants into the aquifer versus keeping it out of the aquifer and using it directly.
Right. So with this study, we will be looking at that at a fairly high level. We're taking the initial assessment. If that were to be further pursued, the concept of using surface water for groundwater recharge, certainly PBAC would ensure that all of those health considerations are being looked at. And again, we will be looking at that, but not to the level that would be needed eventually to fully implement. Right now, we're looking at the wide universe of potential opportunities in understanding pluses and minuses, including considerations like that. Yeah.
Follow-up to the water right question, has there been any preliminary analysis of the existing water rights, the existing water availability, the Nimipu's claims to the water? So have you done enough studies to know if enough water can be acquired to actually put it in the pipeline?
PBAC, PBAC has done some initial work on that, and that is part of the reason why this project has advanced to this point, is that there is indication that there is suitable and available water supply. And that comes from conversations with state IDWR and the tribe and others. Again, we need to further vet that and explore what that availability is at all points through the seasons. We will be looking at potential effects of climate change, long-term trends, considerations like that. But yes, there was initial vetting, and that's part of what has led this project to advance to where it is today.
I have been coming to this conference for about 17 years, on and off mostly, but I am absolutely thrilled tonight to hear that there's actually action going to happen, that this is something that's actually in reality, because we've spent 17 years, working around it. Now, my second question is, it seems like incredibly expensive. Has both university towns or the state gotten involved in providing money? And it's going to be a while, but you know how hard it is to get money. Is there a plan in action to get money for this exact kind of project?
That's a great question, and I think it's above my pay grade. So I'm going to defer to PBAC leadership.
So there's a PayPal QR code on every, no, I'm just kidding. I mean, there really is a PayPal QR code. The states have been immensely supportive. This current study that we're undertaking is being funded in part by the Idaho Water Resource Board. And the state of Idaho has some designated funding that has, up to this point, been protected in the Idaho state budget that is for funding large-scale water projects. The state of Washington has processes for funding this type of thing, as does the federal government. And so this project will take a really preliminary look. We'll start to refine those, and if we clear those initial hurdles, the feasibility hurdles, is this practical and can we do it? And then we'll really have to start digging in the next phase of the project into the funding mechanism. But there are mechanisms both on the federal, state, and local level for helping put together sort of a patchwork quilt of funding for these types of projects.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff. That was really interesting to get an update on where we are with that. Okay, our Summit Planning Committee works hard to bring you some of the country's leading water experts, and this year is no exception. Daniel Rothberg is a former reporter at the Nevada Independent. Rothberg's work was recognized by the Society of Professional Journalists, Best of the West, and Society of Environmental Journalists. He's also served on the board of the Nevada Press Association. His reporting has appeared on ProPublica, Vox, The New York Times, Smithsonian Magazine, Inside Climate News, Sierra Magazine, and High Country News. Rothberg currently writes a Substack newsletter, Invisible Waters. As a researcher and writer, Rothberg is drawn to stories, analysis, and scientific papers that reveal invisible systems. Because of that, groundwater is a particular focus of his work. Daniel is currently studying at the University of California at Davis. Please help me give a warm welcome to Daniel.
Hi, thank you for having me, and I want to give you a double kudos because now I am truly the only thing between you and the rest of your evening. But I'm really delighted to be here. It's a huge honor, and I have learned so much about the Palouse today, and in fact, I almost feel like what is going on in this room and what is going on with the committee and what Paul and John and Mike are working on is almost exactly what I was going to talk about in my talk, just in other case studies and examples. And because at the end of the day, it really does come down to getting people in a room and talking about these water problems, talking across differences, talking across divides. And I've just, between the summit today and earlier at the we met earlier. That's really what I heard today. So it's been really cool to see the progress here that's been made on groundwater, and even though there are still challenges ahead, it is really great to see the infrastructure and a community that's being really proactive. I'm just grabbing my notes here. So I wanted to start. My talk today is really about my experience writing about water in general, and I put groundwater, I put it in parentheses because I really want to raise awareness that groundwater is part of the water cycle. It is actually just water. It's all water, and it's often all connected. But at the end of the day, I still refer to groundwater and surface water throughout. So to start, I wanted to share a little bit about how I got here and how my experiences, both growing up in the West and working in the West, and specifically in Nevada, as a journalist, have informed my perspectives on water. I'm so used to giving talks now on my computer that I was using my arrow buttons. Let's see, big green. So as Aaron mentioned, I grew up in Southern California, and for much of the time growing up, we were in a drought, and my mom was really big on, water conservation, on yelling at me when my showers were too long, and things like that. And I knew that we were having a water problem, but I didn't really know where our water came from and the costs and consequences and the benefits of delivering water from these huge reclamation, what I'd refer to as sort of reclamation systems. Not all federal reclamation systems, but built in this sort of hydrologic era where we were doing huge dam building and aqueducts and things like that. So you can see, I had no idea that my water was coming from the Colorado River to the east. Is there a little arrow here too? Oh yeah, the Colorado River aqueduct from the east, from Northern California, from the California aqueduct, from the LA aqueduct, and really I was geographically distant from a lot of the water that I was drinking that came out of the tap. It was not until I was working as a staff writer at the Las Vegas Sun, about 30 minutes away from Lake Mead, the largest man-made reservoir in the country on the Colorado River, that I really started putting the puzzle pieces together. That many of our water systems are invisible to us on these social and ecological levels and are governed by really, really complex nested systems that, like we're seeing in this room, that require bringing a lot of different voices and a lot of different parties to the table. I realize water is uniquely place-based as a resource, despite the fact that we are often distanced from the places where water comes from. As I grew as a news reporter, my goal in telling stories was to go out where the sun was not shining, to the places where there were more stories than there were reporters covering them. I found many of these places underground in telling stories about groundwater, what we don't see. And I'm sorry to use another image of another conceptual model of groundwater. I'm sure you are all familiar with these. But to me, in 2018, when I started covering groundwater, it was all new. They say that seeing is believing, and for me, I really had to see the groundwater crisis to believe it. In 2018, I was reporting on several rural communities in Nevada whose long-term security, and I mean within 20, 30 years, were threatened by overpumping. The same overuse of the very same resource that had made these communities viable only 50, 60 decades earlier. After one of my stories about groundwater, I was talking on the phone to the head of the USGS Nevada Water Science Center, and I expressed an interest in learning more about groundwater modeling and how exactly scientists were able to glean an understanding of what we could not see, this sort of invisible subsurface flows. I drove down to USGS offices in Carson City, and we talked for a really long time about all these complicated words that I am now starting to understand, like recharge and discharge and phreatophyte ET, groundwater-dependent ecosystems, the law of conservation of mass. And I was really enthusiastic. It was really new to me, and it was fascinating. It was as though kind of this hidden world had opened up before my eyes. He must have sensed that too, and he handed me a classic groundwater textbook that is creatively just called Groundwater. And his message was pretty clear to me that this stuff was important and we should be telling more stories about the water that we can't see. I think I have a well there. So I really wanted to piece the invisible kind of subsurface puzzle together. And I spent the following years really trying to absorb as much as I possibly could about groundwater. Through my work reporting, I was consuming USGS reports on carbonate aquifer systems in Nevada, regional flow systems, really big words that I'm only starting to kind of understand. But my job as a journalist really gave me a unique insight into kind of how the physical sciences fused with policy, society, and the law. A lot of what I was reporting on had to do with science, but it really was about much larger systems. And to me, I really saw how sort of civics and hydrologic policies came together and affected one another. I saw not only how groundwater science informed policies, but how policies shaped and reshaped groundwater aquifers. I saw how pumping too much groundwater could cause land subsidence, the depletion of streams and springs, the intrusion of seawater, and the drying of vital drinking water wells in disadvantaged communities. And this is a problem in many parts of the globe. I have seen kind of, as I've done my reporting, I've seen how the results of water use has led to pretty intractable and growing conflicts, even within pretty homogeneous, ideologically aligned communities. And we all know about water conflict. In pop culture, it's been sort of well documented, and if you were to only follow pop culture, you might believe that water conflict is at the center of all conflict in the Western U.S. We know about Owens Valley and Chinatown, and whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting over. And I don't know if anyone in this room has read The Water Knife, but that is a pretty interesting book. It depicts a futuristic climate dystopian Las Vegas that is trying to steal water from everybody else and actually doing a really good job in The Water Knife. And I've seen conflict in water. It's a lot of what I've written about. But I also see conflict as a platform for dialogue and unexpected coalition building. I see conflict as a sort of path in sometimes, or the needed push to help preserve common resources for the good of the community and the public, for which water is held in trust, according to the state laws and the Constitution in many states across the West. This, in my opinion, moving beyond conflict to a more collaborative approach, is one of the main tasks of this era of water development. What I tend to call, and I don't really know exactly what to call it, so I have 3 ideas, but the era of recognition, recognizing that we have limited supplies, the era of limits, that we are constrained by past choices, by decisions that we may have had no input in, or the era of reconciliation, bringing together disparate groundwater and surface water laws and things like that. I'm currently finishing a book for Island Press about water development in the Great Basin, and it's really focused on that development and how water over time, how we've gone through these different eras and now what it looks like to use less. While I've seen examples of water conflicts that have, while I have seen examples of water conflict, I am about to get to my next slide. Thank you for the, well, I have seen seen instances in which water conflict has been divided on political lines. I've also seen many examples of water issues that fall outside of that paradigm and cut in surprising directions. I've seen communities come together to find solutions that endeavor to preserve social and cultural identities while adjusting to the reality of the need to use less. This is a photo of Elinor Ostrom, who is a political economist, Nobel Prize-winning economist, recognized for her work, writing about, among other things, groundwater basins in Los Angeles. And I wanted to read a quote that she said. She pushed back against this idea of the tragedy of the commons, which I don't know how many people in this room have heard about, but the idea that we are unable as humans naturally to kind of extricate ourselves from depleting common pool resources, whether those are groundwater aquifers or fisheries or timber or grazing rangelands. And I wanted to read a quote by her because I think it really frames how I sort of think about a lot of these issues now. And instead of presuming that, this is her quote, instead of presuming that the individuals sharing a commons are inevitably caught in a trap from which they cannot escape, she said, I argue that the capacity of individuals to extricate themselves from various types of dilemma situations varies from situation to situation. Instead of basing policy on the presumption that the individuals involved are hopeless, I wish to learn more about the experience of individuals in field settings. Why have some efforts to solve commons problems failed while others have succeeded? What can we learn from experience that will help stimulate the development and use of a better theory of collective action? I really like the quote because it really speaks to kind of, I think, what the questions we should be asking now as we look to problems in our own watersheds, but also in what works and what is not working in other places. For me, a lot of this comes down to context. I would say, I think water management, especially in the American West, comes down to sort of understanding historical context. And I think a large part of that is because of the doctrine of prior appropriation, the idea that first in time is first in right, which guides a lot of our law in the Western US. And it rests on the notion that existing and present uses of water are rooted in the historic use of the base right, first in times, first in right. And that means that the history of those water rights and the development of different basins is very important to understand in thinking about how we can live within our means and live within our water budget. My single biggest takeaway from reporting, and probably the main takeaway that I have, is that I think that the future is in distributed solutions, that we, a lot of our water development in the past has looked at these sort of top-down ideas, and I think that the future is really understanding that small-scale solutions or regional solutions can add up to something even greater. And a lot of that is informed by what I've seen on the Colorado River. And I'll echo a quote I heard from John Ensminger, the head of the Southern Nevada Water Authority, when he was talking about solutions to overuse on the Colorado River. He said, there's no silver bullet, there's a silver buckshot, every single pellet is needed. And for all the hydrogeologists we have and need, we also need social scientists to solve this problem. That was just I had a slide of the Colorado River, the lower Colorado, upper Colorado River. So I believe to understand where we're going, I want to spend a little time looking at how we got here, and this is sort of a big part of my book, is just really understanding the development of water, how we got from how we got to where we are now, where in many places there are more rights to water than there is water to go around, over appropriation, and we're using more water than there is water to go around, whether that's in surface water diversions or in groundwater pumping. And I should say our definition of overuse is inherently kind of a human-centric definition. I think it also depends on kind of what our values are and how we view rivers, how we view groundwater aquifers, what we want to prioritize in thinking about our water budgets and what we want to protect. So like I mentioned, I kind of split this into 3 eras for my book. They kind of coincide with each other in a lot of ways, but the first one is sort of the era of big reclamation and dam building. And then the second wave of reclamation, or I call it the second wave of reclamation with groundwater pumping, and then where we are now. I should say that these are somewhat chronological, but are not fully chronological. There are a lot of communities like Las Vegas that tapped into its groundwater first and then switched to surface water. Same with, we saw the pictures of the artesian wells earlier, and so on the Palouse as well, groundwater first. But in many cases, in many of the case studies that I've looked at, you have this era of big dam building and then kind of an explosion of industrial groundwater pumping, and then trying to reconcile the two is sort of a big focus of some of the writing that I've done. So I want to start with the Derby Dam in Nevada in 1905. This is actually the first designed reclamation project, the Bureau of Reclamation project. And it is, people often think of 1902 as the year that really started the federal reclamation era. But I'd argue, as somebody who lived down the road from the Derby Dam for a long time, and I'd argue that this was kind of a pivotal moment in reclamation history, and that the Derby Dam kind of symbolizes a lot of the legacy of the reclamation era. It's not nearly as big as the Hoover Dam or the Grand Coulee, and it doesn't deliver water as far as the Central Arizona Project or the Central Valley Project, but it plays a huge role in reclamation history and kind of thinking about this era. I forget where he is in the picture, but Senator Francis Newlands, who is the Nevada senator and for whom the Newlands Reclamation Act is named, is in there. I think he's actually on the dam. But this is this delegation. This was the dedication day for the Derby Dam, and this delegation was really there. In their mind, they shared this sort of common goal, and their goal was to reclaim reclaim the desert and re-engineer a lot of our wild rivers. Where there were these interdependent ecosystems, they saw what they called waste, and that waste was to be salvaged. To be salvaged for human use. I have a couple of quotes from that day. A congressman from Wyoming compared it to a gathering on the banks of the Nile more than 6,000 years ago for the purpose of dedicating a work similar to that dedicated today. Newlands was similarly fairly hubristic and even a little bit religious in his rhetoric, talking about the dam, declaring that the nation lifts its hands and the lands which have been worthless become valuable for agriculture. The nation lifts its hands. Derby Dam diverted water, as you can see through that canal, to the new city of Fallon for agriculture. And in doing so, this 35-foot structure impeded the flows downstream to, all right, let's see. So this is Lake Tahoe, the start of the Truckee River. It goes down here. This right here is the Derby Dam. It's diverted through the Truckee Canal to Fallon for agriculture, and it impeded the flows to Pyramid Lake down here. Pyramid Lake is the homeland of the Numu Northern Paiute people, and for thousands of years, indigenous communities had relied on Pyramid Lake for healing, spiritual practices, and subsistence. Fish like the Kiwi and Lahontan cutthroat trout used the Truckee's entire 121-mile length to persist, but they were particularly reliant on the aquatic habitat in the lower, well, that's Pyramid Lake, but in the lower reaches down here. So this is a photo of what Pyramid Lake looks like. It's a desert terminal lake. The Truckee River is an endorheic basin, so the water in the Truckee River does not flow to the ocean. And by 1940, Lahontan cutthroat trout were extirpated from the lake, and the neighboring Winnemucca Lake, which also relied on the Truckee River flows, dried up almost completely, or pretty effectively completely, so much so that it was delisted as a wildlife refuge in the 1960s. To me, this is one of the stories about overuse, about stretching water beyond its limits. It's also a story to me about kind of the narrow-sighted vision of the early reclamation era. This was a movement that predated modern environmental laws, the Endangered Species Act, the Clean Water Act, and the EPA. And it viewed water going to the environment as waste. There was no such idea as in-stream flows. There was no such idea as ensuring that water made it down to that a certain amount of water made it down to Pyramid Lake each year. And at the same time, the Bureau of Reclamation ignored priority tribal water rights, despite the fact that they were enshrined by the Supreme Court in the Winters Doctrine in 1908. Doing so and embedded these blind points into the legal framework for the Truckee River and contributed to the overuse and the issues that we see today. And the story doesn't end there, but I will come back to it in a moment, because first I want to talk about what happened next. So that is a Lahontan cutthroat trout that I have here. So I want to talk about sort of what happened after this. In Nevada and across the Great Basin, which is the area that I'm mostly focused on for my research, most of the surface water was appropriated early on. It was appropriated several times over in many cases, and people wanted to look for an alternative supply. And in many cases, they found groundwater. In Las Vegas, where the groundwater story starts in Nevada, the idea that there was groundwater to develop was not a new concept. There were, like Mike showed earlier, there was artesian pressure in the aquifer and springs across the Las Vegas Valley that were developed early on. I really like this photo because it really shows the amount of pressure in the aquifer and the kind of power of these artesian springs. It reminds me of what you see with sort of oil spewing from an uncontrolled blowout. The Las Vegas Land and Water Company, which was established the same year in 1905 as the Derby Dam dedication, started developing groundwater very fast in the Las Vegas Valley. And by the 1930s, there was not only a significant amount of subsidence in the valley, but the artesian pressure was starting to diminish, and people were observing reductions in spring flows and the disappearance of springs. By the 1930s, the state wanted to regulate the aquifer, but part of their challenge in doing so came from the fact that groundwater knowledge was limited. And reliance on it was outpacing regulation, not only in Las Vegas, but across the country. Despite many hopes that groundwater could augment surface water, it was apparent in the early 1900s that groundwater was a solution with serious constraints. As with manipulating streams and rivers, extracting too much water from the ground could result in environmental and social harm. And the USGS knew this in the early 1900s, even before industrial pumping really took hold. Hydrogeologists had established that groundwater pumped out of a well could affect ecosystems and surface water. Hydrologists like C.V. Tice said all water discharged by wells is balanced by the loss of water somewhere. Yet the law did not keep up with this scientific reality. Instead, states, including Nevada, would view groundwater and surface water as two separate and distinct resources, despite their clear hydrologic connections. This has amplified. I have a photo of what subsidence looked like in the Las Vegas Valley, and you can see, this isn't from the 1960s, but you can see how far the ground has sunk in that time. This sort of dichotomy between the science and the law has really amplified overuse in many places across the West. And increased pumping has brought economic wealth to a lot of places, it's depleted surface water flows for irrigators, similar to the dynamic that's playing out in the Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer. And I did a story last year that brought me down to Twin Falls, and it was really eye-opening to see the scale of the problem and some of the challenges that they face in trying to bring their total water budget into balance. In the 1950s and beyond, the groundwater boom began in earnest in places like the Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer and in places across Nevada, like Diamond Valley, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. Irrigators actually repurposed homesteading laws from the late 1800s, like the Desert Land Act, to bring new land online, to bring new irrigation land online. And this really caused a lot of overdraft in a lot of basins across the West. A few states have had more serious, and I'm going to get back to Nevada in a moment, but I wanted to talk for a minute about California because few states have had more serious groundwater issues than California. And this is a famous photo in the Central Valley showing subsidence, and you can see from 1925 to 1955 to 1977 how much the land has sunk in the Central Valley. In 2014, California passed the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which aimed to address the problem with a combination of local planning, reductions in use, and augmentation, and an augmentation like managed aquifer recharge. SIGMA, as the law is known, does a good job identifying 6 undesirable results from groundwater, and I think it just shows what the impacts could be if groundwater is not addressed, if groundwater problems are not addressed. And that includes lowering groundwater levels, storage reduction, seawater intrusion for coastal aquifers, degraded water quality, land subsidence, and surface depletion. What we were talking about earlier, the connection between groundwater and surface water. When you pump too much groundwater, depending on the connectivity and proximity, you can affect surface water sources like springs and streams. We in the US, like I said before, are not alone in the challenges that we face with groundwater. Much of the world face similar challenges, and they are often invisible until they are difficult to reverse, until springs have been lost or vegetation has been lost or ecosystems have been lost. I have a chart here from a recent paper that looks at this idea of peak groundwater when communities reach a point where there's such diminishing returns in pumping groundwater that groundwater actually starts to be reduced. This, however, can be avoided with management. And I guess that is one of my big messages today, which is that management matters. So where does that leave us today? I am not here to be doom and gloom. In fact, despite the complicated historical legacy in which we operate, I have a lot of hope. By recognizing that there's a problem, that scarcity exists, rather than avoiding it, I think that we can develop solutions. My message today is that management matters. First, we need to plan for our water on a regional basin-wide scale. In states across the western U.S., groundwater and surface water regulations, rules, and statutory frameworks have developed separately, even though those two sources are hydrologically connected as one in many places. Ignoring the science has made efforts to use less more difficult, recovery times longer, and amplify the problem of overuse. We need to start managing groundwater and surface water together, asking questions like, how can surface water be used through managed aquifer recharge and other programs to refill our groundwater aquifers, and how can groundwater be used to ensure base flows into our streams? What is the total budget that we have to live in, and how can we ensure we keep outflows and inflows in balance? We must view our water cycle as it is, interconnected. Second, my kind of second message is that the future is really in distributed solutions and solutions that come from local communities, not top-down solutions. I included this chart here just to show, well, I'll get to that in a second, but in the past, reclamation has looked to move water from large cities or farms from far away, hundreds of miles away from the source. I believe the future really depends on local solutions with engaged communities. When Congress approved the Central Arizona Project in the 1960s, they did so knowing that the Colorado River was going to run out of water. So much so that is why California has senior water rights to the Colorado River. They said, if you want to build this project, we're going to have senior water rights. At the time, they looked to large-scale style augmentation for the Colorado River, including this kind of wild plan to move water all across North America, from Canada, from the Columbia River Basin. But there were other similar proposals, including some outlined in this report, to move water, to actually divert water from the Snake River down to, I think, Walker Lake in California, and then get it to the LA Aqueduct. These projects have never come to pass, and in part because of permitting politics and the staggering costs. But at the same time, we've seen demand for Colorado River water decrease. And that's due to dozens, if not hundreds, of conservation programs all coming together. At the same time, users are looking at augmentation through water recycling and desalination. To all of this, community engagement is foundational, and it has been really neat today to see so many people in the Palouse coming together around these issues. I want to talk a little bit about what I've seen. We have this era of reclamation and over-appropriation. We have this era of over-pumping groundwater. And I want to talk a little bit about what I've seen and how communities have adapted. I'm just gonna, sorry, I have a couple. Okay, gotta go back. So this is Diamond Valley in Nevada, and in 2015, the state of Nevada declared Diamond Valley a critical management area. That meant that if irrigators did not come up with a plan to reduce use within 10 years, the state would curtail by priority, which was using first in time, first in right rules. That was considered to be a pretty draconian measure that would have put much of the valley out of business. Because, as I mentioned before, there was so much homesteading in the 1950s with new reconnaissance and discoveries around groundwater. This line right here represents what was a safe yield for water withdrawals in Diamond Valley in about 30,000 acre feet. And this represents a total number of water rights, about 120,000 acre feet. And this represents a hydrograph in Diamond Valley, which shows that the valley, that the water table was decreasing by about 2.5 feet per year over about 15 years. So the state came in and said, if you don't figure out something in 10 years, we're gonna start cutting people off, basically cutting all of these people off to this line right here. This is the paper water rights, so there wasn't quite as much water pumped, but it would have been a significant reduction in water. Everyone knew it was a problem and was depleting senior surface water rights to spring flow. And that groundwater pumping was depleting surface water rights to spring flow, even drying up several springs, but no one wanted to act for 30, 40 years. At first, irrigators fought over what to do. As the county's natural resource director told me, every meeting was just an hour of my neighbor did this, and I did this, and it was wrong that they did that. And he said, we need to acknowledge the past, but we can't change it. We can only start from where we're at and make the best going forward. Eventually, the irrigators voted on a plan that can be thought of as a negotiated curtailment. By facilitating a negotiated curtailment, and they did this by facilitating water trading, buying, selling, and banking water. Under the plan, water rights in the valley were turned into shares, and I can show you what that looks like. Shares in a ledger, and total use was capped. Each year, the aggregate cap goes down a certain amount, and the amount of shares are reduced a commensurate amount according to an equation that takes into consideration the water rights priority. The plan gave farmers what they wanted: flexibility to plan, invest in efficiency, strategic fallowing, selling fields in some cases, and at the same time, it met the state's requirements of reducing groundwater use. Another example of living within its limits is the Las Vegas Valley. Las Vegas, as I mentioned before, was sort of at the epicenter of Nevada's groundwater use. Once it had depleted that supply, they quickly turned to the Colorado River supply in the mid-20th century. It quickly outgrew that supply too, and by the early 1990s and into the 2000s, the city began looking to construct a pipeline to import rural groundwater from northeastern Nevada. So this is Las Vegas down here, and the city was looking to take water from up here. This all looks pretty close, but in Nevada, this is about 250 miles away. But then something else happened. What I think we've talked about a lot here with municipal conservation. There was a big decoupling from growth, a decoupling between growth and water use. Las Vegas invested in aggressive conservation measures, including indoor recycling, converting turf, and ordinances to limit outdoor irrigation on new construction. It meant that per capita water use has gone down significantly. Total consumption, or I should say, total consumptive use of the Colorado River has gone down 36% as the population has increased. Las Vegas even hired water cops. Where once they were overusing their Colorado River apportionment, Las Vegas now had water to dedicate to new growth and to bank for future years, in part by refilling the aquifer that had been depleted with the surface water that they were saving from the Colorado River. At the same time, Las Vegas acquired water rights to tributaries from the Colorado, the Muddy, and the Virgin Rivers. When there was pushback, I think this is a really key point in Las Vegas. When there was pushback, the leaders held firm. They were able to build a really strong coalition that included not only elected officials and people from the Water Authority, but also developers and community, and much of the community, in understanding that a short-term sacrifice in pool sizes and in decorative ornamental turf was worth the long-term gains in a more sustainable community and long-term growth. The third and final place I want to go, and I'll just end sort of where I began, is on the Truckee River, where Lahontan cutthroat trout are back at Pyramid Lake. By 1983, the tribe was pushing the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe had taken a case that went to the United States Supreme Court, arguing that the federal government had ignored, which it had ignored the tribe's claim to sustain Pyramid Lake and sustain fish at Pyramid Lake. The Supreme Court sided against the tribe, but they sided against the tribe while agreeing that the United States had ignored their claim to water. That was a huge turning point in getting water back to Pyramid Lake. And after years and years of negotiation and investments, water users on the Truckee River agreed to new operating guidelines that changed the way these initial reclamation dams were operated to allow for more water to get to Pyramid Lake. At the same time, the tribe has invested in, and the federal government has funded the purchase of in-stream flows that have brought more water to the lake, and Lahontan cutthroat trout and kiwi are starting to persist again. This is an example of one of those projects, a fish passage project near the delta into Pyramid Lake. This is photo of Pyramid Lake. I also just wanted to note the Truckee Meadows water, that there have been, in addition to the governance changes that have allowed more water to go to Pyramid Lake from the reservoirs, there have been also significant changes in how water is used upstream. Even though more conservation can be done, we've also seen here that the gallons per capita day total from the Water Authority has gone down. The Water Authority has invested actually in an effluent pipeline to use recycled water for some of its corporate customers at data centers and industrial centers. The utility is also experimenting with aquifer storage and recovery as well, treating wastewater to potable water standards and re-injecting it into the groundwater, which they've shown through a lot of testing to be a safe and good method for storing water. My final message before we get to the Q&A is that we can find ways to live within our limits, sustain our communities and our environments. All the communities that I mentioned have different water portfolios, but face the same imbalance between supply and demand. I think every place has its own context and its own history, but from a 30,000-foot view, the problem across the West is similar in many places, there being more rights to use water than there is water to go around. I believe that there are solutions out there. They're not perfect, and they're rarely without any pushback, and solutions look different in different places. But communities are making progress in balancing long-term supply with demand and finding sustainable ways to maintain and grow their local economies. And our long-term water security in the West really depends on it. So that is all I have, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for this presentation and the histories that go with it. We've heard a few of these things, but it's nice to see it packaged together. In the beginning of your presentation, you referred to water knives or something like
that.
Yeah. I was wondering if you were aware of the work by Aaron Wolf at Oregon State University. He has studied with his students the types of conflicts over water across the world, mostly transboundary related. And he claims that there's never been a war recorded based on water conflict. So it has really interesting examples, like between India and Pakistan, where we know there are border issues, but they never stop collaborating on water. So far, that's a good story.
Yeah. Yeah, I think water can really unite us. Like, I think there's a lot of focus on division around water, but I think more often than not, I've seen water unite communities and not divide them, and unite them in different ways than we would think of normally, not on these red versus blue or political ideological lines, but aligned around different values and interests, which I think is really interesting. Yeah.
One note, Aaron Wolf, when I saw him give a talk, I asked him how groundwater plays into his analysis, and he said it doesn't. So there's room to evaluate how groundwater offsets the potential for conflict versus collaboration. That's a comment. My question is, do you consistently see either types of information or hydrologic conditions or something else that gains traction and moves the needle forward in action around water that is transferable across regions? Or is each location really specific in what leads to investment and action in mitigating shortage?
Yeah, I mean, I think that hydrological conditions play a huge role in spurring action, and I think that has until very recently potentially been playing out on the Colorado River, where you have periods of kind of inaction and status quo governance, and then you have very, very severe, you have very low runoff years where you see a need for kind of immediate action. So I think hydrology plays a huge role, but I also think that there are more, I think the threat of litigation and the threat of outside intervention also plays a huge role, whether that is the threat of a judge who maybe is not familiar with the hydrology and specifics of a basin coming in and issuing an order, or whether that's a regulator from Washington, D.C., or from the state coming in and curtailing based off a certain law. And I think the doctrine of prior appropriation itself serves that role because, it often is this sort of looming threat that nobody fully understands and is not well quantified. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. Not that this necessarily applies to the Palouse, but have you had any interest in exploring fracking? I understand uses a lot of groundwater and questions on sustainability.
I have not done that much on fracking, mostly because a lot of my research and work was in Nevada, and there's very little oil and gas exploration in Nevada. However, I am really interested in, and it is different from fracking, but enhanced geothermal systems and the water that is used in geothermal. In those systems, drilling is done to basically kind of generate geothermal activity where there is potential, but not necessarily the conditions for it. So I am interested in that. Yeah.
Let me go back over here. Thank you so much. I was just wondering, when you mentioned the management of groundwater and surface water together, if you've seen any areas within your research that are sort of leading the way with that, or setting an example for what other communities and areas could be doing?
There's a lot of places, and I think the way that groundwater and surface water interacts is different in different places, and the term conjunctive use is used differently to apply to different situations. I think one example of where conjunctive management is taking place would be on, for example, or one type of conjunctive management that's taking place in interesting ways is on the Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer or in the Humboldt River in Nevada, in places where where junior groundwater pumping, so groundwater pumping with lower priority rights, is depleting stream flows or depleting spring flows of senior surface water users. And that's why the sequencing of this history is so important. So that's one place where conjunctive management is taking place, and there's some interesting applications of science to try to offset or mitigate with markets or other tools. And then the other place where it's taking place is, I mean, both Reno and Las Vegas and a lot of cities will use excess surface water to recharge their aquifers, and vice versa, and that really buffers against provides a lot of resilience against drought. When you have low inflows and you need to pull on that groundwater, you already have it banked to then take it out and use it when it's needed. Thanks.
Thank you, Daniel. That was great. Thanks for making the trip all the way to the Palouse. So tonight we've heard from a lot of really great speakers. We've heard about collaboration, conservation, education, and we're trying to row in the right direction. So let's keep our oars in the water. Some last things. So there's plenty of food left, I guess, so everybody can get another snack. There are some to-go boxes. People can take some to-go boxes with them. We want to thank our sponsors, and we want to thank Moscow Building Supply for the low-flow toilet, and SYG Nursery for the gift certificate. So I'm going to call up John Kimberling, and we're going to do our drawing right now. Okay.
We're just about to the finish line. I just want to say a couple quick things. I'm just curious for our committee, how many of you are here for the first time? Would you mind putting your hands up? Thank you so much for being here. We need you. We need everybody, but we especially need to keep bringing some new people in. Couple other quick comments. Tyler alluded to the QR code on your program. Please scan it, and if you want, if we're doing a good job in your mind and you want to help us out a little bit financially, we can use the money so we can keep bringing in great speakers like Daniel. Just another point of pride I think we can feel tonight. I don't know if you saw it in the paper, but the city of Boise started a water summit a year ago. Yeah, isn't that great? We're 2 decades plus in. I feel it's appropriate to just say a couple quick thank yous. There's a lot of people in this room, if I ask you to put your hands up, who are serving in an elected position. Thank you. There's a lot of people in the room tonight that are aspiring to service. Thank you as well. And the last special thank you I want to say is to my friend Art Betke. If you know Art's history, he started on some City of Moscow committees, and I believe it was over 20 years ago. And then he served on City Council for quite a long time before he served us the last 4 years as our mayor. What a great example of public service. Please help me thank Art Betke. One important tidbit, we have beverages and food that we serve. It is not the money we receive from our cities and counties and universities that pays for that. That's money we use from our sponsors, because as a committee, we've never felt that it was appropriate to spend that money in that way, just so you know. And so with that, we're going to give away the SYG Nursery Certificate. Robin's handy here. I'll put her to work. And the number is, and you do have to be present to win, 5427550. $5427561. I will clean up the tickets. 5427616. All right. We will get you the certificate. Let's connect before you leave. And then for many, many years, just about the entire time, we have given away a low-flow toilet. Both cities have robust conservation programs. They do a great job, and this is another reminder of that. And we've had another fantastic partner in Tyler Garrett from Moscow Pullman Building Supply, a local company that's been here on the Palouse 50-plus years, and he steps up every year and donates that toilet to us. So who's going to be the lucky winner tonight? I guess we just need the last three numbers. 588. Sorry. Oh, Scott Sumner. Congratulations, Scott. And then I'll turn it back over to Robin for just a second for any very, very, very last comments she has. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. Till next year.